property actually fronts on two streets, Fairchild and Berwick, towards the end of Fairchild Avenue. You might recall there's a 54-unit residential development under construction now at the terminus of Fairchild Avenue. This property is essentially across the street from that. This is an 8-30G affordable housing application that does require public hearing.
Okay. Any comment or discussion on the item? The motion would be to recommend for public hearing.
I just have a question for staff. Out of the 33 units, they said the plan of how many will be...
Well, the 30% minimum have to be set aside.
Right, I know that's 30%.
Right.
They haven't submitted a plan what it has to be.
No, they do. They have you'll get a whole, there's an affordability plan that lays that all.
Okay, yeah. I mean, the last one was 50%, so I just wondered.
This is a different applicant, not the same developer as the one developing the one under construction.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It's it's in the same proximity, but not the same applicant.
Okay, never mind. Well, I thought it was, okay, it's at least 30% then, okay. Well, I'll move to recommend the public hearing.
Motion to recommend a public hearing. Any second?
I'll second.
Second. Commissioner Alessi. Any discussion on the item?
We expect a March public hearing date for this one.
March. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Item carries unanimously. Next item is 464 Pine Creek Avenue, special exception and coastal site plan application of Round Hill Road Associates pertaining to the construction of a single-family dwelling. This is in the floodplain district.
This is a lot that was approved by subdivision back in the late 80s. It's undeveloped. It needs a special exception because it does lie within the floodplain district, so any project that exceeds 250 square feet of construction by our regs requires a special exception application, which does require a public hearing.
Okay. Can I have a motion? Anyone? Commissioner Neely moves to approve.
I'll second the motion to move it to public hearing.
Second by Commissioner Barretts. Any discussion on the item? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstention? Item carries unanimously. Next item is 1127 Post Road, special permit of Brick Walk Associates for a second floor addition for 3 residential units, and this is in the Center Design Business District.
Yes, this particular structure within the Brick Walk is where Citibank is. It's currently a 1-story building. They're looking to put a second floor on that building to create 3 residential apartments. It is new construction and does require a public hearing.
Good motion.
Good. Commissioner Alessi's made a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Second by Commissioner Calabrese. Any discussion on the item? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Item carries unanimously. Next item on our agenda is 3 old business. The only old business, 893 Sasko Hill Road. It's a re-subdivision application of Bernard and Cynthia McDonald for 2 lots in a AAA zone. Public hearing was held on November 12, 2013, December 10, 2013, and it expires February 13th, 2014. Present were Barretts, Alessi, Jacobson, Kennelly, Wagner, Neely, Calabrese, Coleman, Corcoran, and Francis.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, what I'll do is just outline for you what was presented at the hearing and highlight for you what your findings and requirements are for this application. The property, as mentioned, is located at 893 Sasko Hill Road. The property presently contains a total of 4.13 acres. The property is located in a AAA residential district, which includes a lot area requirement of 2 acres. The intent of the application, or the applicant, is to subdivide the property, maintaining the existing residences and creating one single family dwelling lot adjacent to Sasko Hill Road. The town conservation department had confirmed that no inland wetland approval was necessary for the subdivision. The properties are serviced by public water and sewer. This subdivision application involves the same property which was a subject of an earlier re-subdivision application to the commission. That application was denied by the Planning and Zoning Commission on April 15, 2013. And the two reasons for that, and I'll read them really quickly just to refresh your memory, is number one, the proposed plan does not comply with section 2.7 of the zoning regulations in that more than one dwelling will be serviced by a single access to the rear lot, and such access does not provide a safe and practical means for access to the lot. And the second reason for denial of the April 15, 2013 application was the plan does not comply with section 2.1.1.6 of the subdivision regulations in that the access way will serve more than a single interior lot. What the applicant did in the second application was try to address these issues. The documentation that they submitted, first of all, confirmed that the status of the two dwellings to be served by single access on the charred property, as well the legal status of two dwellings to be served on the single access to the McDonald property. Further, and more importantly, the plan as revised provides a separate access to each of the interior lots. The original application had one access for both lots. The applicants are requesting, as part of this application, a fee in lieu of open space dedication to be established as per our recommendations of the Conservation Commission. On Tuesday, October 23rd, 2013, or excuse me, 12, the TPC Commission, pursuant to section 2.3.9 of the subdivision regulations, voted to recommend payment of a fee in lieu of the open space. That amount would be approximately $25,440. A stopping site distance analysis was done, as usually required by the Commission, and based on the results of that analysis and review of the town engineering department, the driveway, in their opinion, meets the standards followed by the town as well as the existing driveway that's there. In response to an issue that was raised at an earlier meeting, subject to section 2.1.10, existing streets, the applicant submitted a plan which could increase the width of an existing Sasko Hill Road right-of-way which fronts this property to 50 feet. The applicant is requesting, pursuant to section 2.1.10, that the Commission modify this requirement to maintain the width of Sasko Hill frontage as is. So essentially, the Commission in this application needs to make these following findings. One, that payment in lieu of open space is acceptable to the Commission. Two, that the lot size and dimensions are consistent with our regulations. Three, two reasons of denial addressed, the two reasons of original denial are addressed with the proposed separate access to each of the interior lots. And finally, as per section 2.1.10, the Commission, in its discretion, permits the width of the Sasko Hill frontage to remain as is. That, Mr. Chairman, is essentially the outline of what was presented at the hearing. Neil said if you have any questions, we're available.
So, with respect to the findings, it's my understanding from the Connecticut statutes 826 that the request for waiver needs to occur by a 3/4 vote. Is that?
Let me consult with my,
Well, it depends on what you consider.
Right.
Yeah, 2.1.10 to be a waiver of the regulations or
Just
discretionary design. If you consider it to be a waiver of the subdivision regulations, then a 3/4 vote is fine.
Right.
If you consider it to be a discretionary provision of the regulations, it doesn't rise to what is a waiver, then it would be a majority vote.
if you look at the last sentence in that section, 2.1.10, it talks about the Commission at its discretion
May.
can allow, right. So, I mean, frankly, I agree with Jim, it's a decision that you would make, whether you feel, based on the way they're regulated, that it is a waiver of our regulations, or in fact, it's just a discretion on your part to allow it to remain as is far as the width is.
Do you have the letter, Attorney Fitzpatrick's letter requesting?
Yeah. I'll just read it to you.
Sure.
Yeah. Their chairman, well, at the time it was Chairman Barrett. He'll make the adjustment.
He's still here.
The undersigned, as you are aware, represents the applicant relative to the above referenced subdivision. In response to an issue raised at the last public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission, please consider this letter a written request pursuant to subdivision regulations that the Commission reduce the section 2.1.10 required 50-foot street right-of-way to the existing Sasko Hill Road right-of-way. Acquisition of additional land to the town under section 2.1.10 for future road widening while attainable pursuant to the plan submitted to the Commission at this date is inappropriate and unnecessary given the decades-long configuration of the present Sasko Hill Road and the lack of any anticipated utilization of the widening right-of-way of the town. Please contact the undersigned with any questions. I could pass this around if anyone wants to take a look at it.
I just didn't happen to have that
Yeah,
in
sure.
my papers that I realized on my way here. So it's your consideration that it would be a modification in our discretion that would be subject to a majority vote?
That's how it would happen, in my opinion, yes.
Commissioner
Can I talk? I should talk now.
Vice Chairman.
Well,
Oh, sorry, Secretary.
Yeah, again, it's just an opinion, because this has not come up with a correlation. I would tend to agree that it's just a majority vote. And here's the reason why is that waiver section at the end, which mimics a lot of the state statutes, that talks about you need a 3/4 vote, which is 6 of us, and there has to be a specific hardship there, some practical difficulty, safety. It's got some words right out of the statute. That's what you need. Where we're usually asked to apply that is with curbs and sidewalks. And in the curbs and sidewalk section, I don't think it says that the commission may modify this at its discretion. It just says curbs and sidewalks are required in A, B, and C. So in order for us to waive that requirement, we loop into section 4, where you have to have a 3/4 vote for a waiver. In section 2.1.10, the last sentence does say the commission may modify this requirement at its discretion. It doesn't say that in all sections of the thing. So I think there could be some interpretation that you could do that with a majority vote, since it's described right there in 2.1.
As I mentioned, that last sentence seems to give you that discretion.
Either way, I think we can do it. I just don't know what you're trying to get, whether it needs to be a 4-3 vote or a 6-1 vote.
And, yeah,
And-
I mean, make sure that we, do what we need to
Yep.
procedurally.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Whether we do one and weigh the other. I don't think it's necessary.
I think it's your chairman's interpretation.
Yeah.
No, that's
I
fine.
agree.
All right, very good. Okay, anything else?
That's it?
Commission?
You're looking for a motion?
Anyone have a motion? I can't make a motion.
Yeah, I'll make I'll move, we approve this application.
And I second it.
Okay, the motion been made to approve by Commissioner Barrett and seconded by Commissioner Neely. Is there any discussion on the item? Commissioner Barrett?
I'll start if you want. I'd rather turn it over pretty quick. Yeah, I mean, I think Mr. Devanchik described it pretty well, what has gone, in terms of what has gone before. We heard an application, we denied it, there were 2 reasons enumerated. The applicant believes that they've addressed those reasons, and if you're just talking about those 2 facts, I would tend to agree. It had to do with the the more than one, only one access to multiple lots. There was a lot of question, I remember at the first hearing, about exactly how many dwellings were there, and even myself, I was counting 4 with one access way, but there was some, other information provided on the charred property, and that those were pre-existing legal dwellings. But the new application does have 2 access for the subdivision, so I believe they have addressed those concerns. As far as this application, the most recent one, and then whether it meets our subdivision regulations, I think it, in most cases in terms of lot size, shape, and access, it does meet those regulations in terms of those types of criteria at the time of application. Obviously, our access and frontage requirements change since the time of application, but that doesn't matter. So then the big question, as you said, was the 2.1.10. I mean, it is explicit in our regulations that roads need to be 50 feet wide. I think we should have a good discussion about this, about how we interpret that. I mean, I'm more of a letter of the regulations person myself. It needs to be 50 feet, and the plan needs to show it as 50 feet. However, I drove down that road, other lots or not, so I think we have to figure out what position we need to take on it. I'll also say that driving down Sasko Hill Road, even looking at some of these, I don't think the maps really do it justice how narrow that road is. There was some testimony about, how much vehicular traffic, and I think it actually looks wider on the plans than it is when you drive it. It's narrow, it's pretty well traveled, and I believe that there are some, safety considerations, and perhaps the road should be wider. But again, within our purview here, we can't widen the entire road. We have to look at the road in front of this subdivision, and it does specify 50 feet. So, I mean, I'd like to hear how other commissioners feel about this, or if there's other issues that they may have found with the application. But I think that is the big issue that we need to decide.
Did you have any thoughts on the alternate plan versus the request?
That's another good point. The original plan just ignored the 50 feet, and it didn't even address that. And actually, it did not even come up in the first public hearing. It came up in the second public hearing, rightly so, and a new plan was submitted. A new plan that showed different lot lines. I mean, it wasn't so alternate that it took 4 lots down to 2 or something like that. It was still a 2-lot subdivision, but it had a different configuration, if you will. So I think it was a different plan. But the applicant is asking us, really, I think their first choice is that we don't even take an alternate plan, that we just, I'll use the word, modify the requirement at our discretion to say that they can just leave the road as wide as it is now and not change that.
Well, not provide for the right of way.
Not provide for the right of way. I think that's their first choice. Now, if we don't do that and we say we need the 50 feet, then you go to the fact that whether it's an alternate plan or whether we need to hear this again. I mean, it right.
It would be a denial.
Denial, yeah.
Subject to a new application with however they might make that.
Yeah, I hate to sound undefinitive. I'm not sure. It is, it is an alternate plan. Does it rise to the level of a new application? We've had things tweaked before, but this is actually physically tweaking the subdivision, meaning this lot is here and this lot is here. It's a little different than we're going to submit a revised drainage plan or whatever, revised grading or landscaping or some of the types of things where sometimes we get. This is actually different lot lines. So I would say it is a different plan. Whether it's how different it is, substantially different, I'm not sure. So I hate to sound so indecisive, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to hear what other people have to think about these issues. I'm just trying to lay out what I think the major issues are.
Yes. Commissioner Kennelly?
I'll be decisive. 3 points. First, I think that we do need to respect the 50-foot right-of-way. I think it's critical to understand that we work in these kinds of decisions at a very limited capacity, or administrative capacity. And it is crucial to understand that we really are limited to what are the boxes on the grid right there. So to me, my view is that indeed the 50-foot setback should be enforced. What happened in the past, I don't know. I wasn't party to those decisions, but from my perspective, we shouldn't waive it. As a result, I wouldn't support the application before us, and as far as any kind of alternate application, this is a subdivision application. The division of property is, the dividing line is what a subdivision is. You are subdividing properties. And before this commission, we've had a number of instances where there were plans where small flaws were found in them. Over time, they were picked apart by the excellent work of this commission, where essentially the majority said to applicants, "I'm sorry, what you presented to us is, is not what is not really what we can vote on, because it's two different things." So, from my perspective, I think that the only answer here is to enforce the 50-foot, and as a result, I will not support this application for subdivision.
Anyone else? Mr. Calabrese?
Sure. I'm just going to echo everything that's been said, especially by Mr. Kennelly there. For me, it comes down to safety, and Section 2.1.10 says you need that 50 feet right away, and I don't think we should make any exception to that. Just like Mr. Kennelly said, he might not have been present for those votes. I know I wasn't. I will not be supporting this.
Mr. Jacobs?
This one took a lot of thought, but I agree with the comments of my colleagues. I will not support this. It's we do need the sidewalks. We can't make an exception because it sets a precedent, and it is a new plan. Granted, it's minor, but I do think that we need a new hearing. Thank you.
Commissioner Neely?
Yes. Well, I'm in favor of this. I don't see making one person on Sasko Hill Road put a sidewalk in front and having, I mean the 50-foot, I don't see that, having one person do that when the rest of Sasko Hill Road is, essentially all the same. I just, I don't see making one person do that. So I'm in favor of this application. It's very simple.
Okay, I think that was everyone. I'll chime in here. Just preliminarily, I don't view this as a requirement of one person. There is a right-of-way all along Sasko Hill Road, and other properties have to respect that and not build in that area, for example. And to waive that for this particular property would provide this property owner with something that all the other property owners, for example, would have to maintain. And if there were other subdivisions, then they would have to abide by the regulations as well. I really was, troubled by this application. I tried to do a little research to see if there were any fact patterns that were out there in cases that were at all similar to help me in considering this. And miraculously, I found one. It's Castle Lane Developers versus the P&Z of the City of Ansonia. That's 2013 Westlaw 2350757, recently decided May 8th, 2013. And in this case, and I won't belabor the facts, but basically they submitted a plan for 22 or 24 lot subdivision. They had narrow roads. The regulations required 30. They had 23 feet. They had the road was longer than a cul-de-sac could be under the regulations, and they petitioned for a waiver. The other issues arose during the public hearings, and they submitted a new plan at the second public hearing and then other issues arose, and then ultimately they submitted an alternate plan at the third hearing. And, some of the things in the court's decision, ultimately the P&Z denied the application. They did not consider the new plan, and they denied the application based on the refusal of the waivers. And, the court in the case affirmed the commission's refusal to consider the new plan because it was a substantial departure from the previously submitted revised drawings. That the court noted that it was significant that the public testimony and all of the comments by the relevant parties and agencies had been based on the original plans. And for these reasons, the court upheld the commission's decision not to consider the new plan or alternate plan that was submitted by the applicant. The court basically assessed the commission's responsibility to assess the application on the plans as submitted with the application. That certainly there could be minor or technical amendments to plans. There could be conditions of approval that can be set in the process, but where there is a significant departure, it's a new plan, and where there is prejudice to the public and in considering those plans, that it was within the discretion of the commission not to consider those new plans. Here, I agree with Commissioner Kennelly. I think that, and Commissioner Barrett's and others, that the essence of a subdivision application is the subdivision. And when you start moving lot lines and reconfiguring the essence of the application, as even the applicant's witnesses stated in their testimony, you are submitting a new plan. I mean, I was trying to get to this, to the root of this during the public testimony when I asked about the revision dates on the plan, and the applicant's engineer said very pointedly, well, there isn't a revision date because this is a new plan. And the applicant's attorney very transparently argued that they were now, this is at the final public hearing, they were now requesting a waiver or in the alternative for us to, look at this new plan. So in the case, the applicant then submitted an alternate plan which had a road that cut through and complied with all the regulations, and notwithstanding that new plan, the commission denied the waiver and denied the waiver and denied the application. So here I find very similar facts, and so we need to assess the application on the plan submitted. The plan submitted did not contain, they didn't meet our regulations. They did not provide for the 50-foot right-of-way. They didn't comply with 2.1.10. Very simple. So at the last public hearing, the applicant requested a waiver. There's no basis for the request. It's just simply, we didn't do it, we don't want to do it, and we'd like it to be waived. Fundamentally, I don't really think that's quite fair. I mean, in order for us to waive regulations under the other sections of our regulations, and frankly, under the Connecticut statutes, Section 8-26, the commission can waive, and by the way, I also view this as a request for waiver. I mean, maybe within our discretion, and based on the language in this particular regulation, but they're not asking for the requirement to be modified in any way, i.e. 50 feet to 25, or, to reduce it to 35. They're asking for it to be completely eliminated, i.e. a waiver. So, the conditions upon which a waiver may be considered are that it would not have a significant adverse effect on adjacent property or on public health and safety. I don't know that I can find that based upon any evidence in the record. Nothing was submitted or argued to us that would support such a finding. So, as a fundamental matter, I just don't see how I could, in good conscience, grant the waiver on that basis. But my issue rises to yet a further level, which is that it seems the general question being pondered is, well, gee, if the town has no plans to widen the road, well, then we should just grant the waiver. And I don't see it quite that way, because if there was a public proceeding, if we were in our planning capacity, which we do regularly, meet and consider future plans for the town, and we have public hearings on what the town is interested in doing and so forth, if we as a town and a commission in our planning function was to make the determination that the town of Fairfield does not in the future have any plan to widen the road, well then maybe we could consider that. But in this procedural posture, in the context of what is otherwise our administrative capacity to review a subdivision application, for us to grant the waiver here would permanently prevent the town from ever exercising its right to expand the road, because we would be essentially making that property come all the way up, and then there would be no other room to do so. I'm not comfortable with making that decision in this procedural posture. I'm not satisfied that, that in the future, in our generation, our children's generation, the town may not decide to expand Southport Beach. Perhaps some of the property that's along the waterfront becomes developed in a different way, and the town decides that they want to expand the road and provide for different amenities. I'm not comfortable in the context of this subdivision application making a decision that would prevent that in the future. So I just don't see how procedurally the waiver could be granted under these facts, in this circumstance, and based on this record. And for that reason, I don't see how I can support the motion to approve. Commissioner Barracks?
Yeah, no, that was excellent commentary from the chairman and all the other members of the commission. I mean, I have to agree, we have to fall on the side of our regulations, just as we do with curbs and sidewalks in the zones where that's a requirement. It should be 50 feet. So that road is narrow. Whether it gets widened or not, I can't see waiving that requirement for that road. It carries a lot of traffic. There's a beach at the end of it, and I don't see any rationale for why we should waive that requirement or reduce it. So whatever you call it, I'm in favor of a 50-foot road. So then the other question becomes, well, the applicant said, well, that was their first choice. Their second choice was, well, if you won't waive the requirement, that we will submit an alternate plan showing we can meet that. But I think the chairman put forth some excellent argument that it is an alternate plan, and that would necessarily be a new application. I mean, I think that's what we have to come down on. So again, the road should be 50 feet wide, and the application should, at the outset, have lot lines and a subdivision that conforms with our regulations, including that. And I think we need to be, very vigilant about this regulation going forward, regardless of the street. I mean, unless widening the road itself would pose some additional safety hazard that not widening it would, then there's no argument to
but we didn't
not
hear
do
any of that. I mean, we didn't hear any justification other than we didn't do it and we don't want to do it. And I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I would just like to note, for the record, that I do cite the case and adopt its rationale, and that the rationale of the case supports the decision here. Is there any further discussion? Okay, so I'll call for a vote. The motion that is before us is to approve the application. So a vote in the affirmative is to approve the application. A vote in the negative is to deny the application. Okay? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Neely? All those opposed? Nay?
Nay.
Any abstentions? The item fails. The next item on our agenda is item 4, compliances. 3482 Post Road. It's a compliance application of Cher Anderson to convert existing second-floor residential use to commercial use to expand an existing hair salon in a design commercial district.
Now, this site is on the northerly side of the Post Road at the intersection of Kings Highway West and Southport. The building at this location is the location of the Total Look Salon on the first floor, and there are currently 3 residential apartments on the second floor. What's proposed here is an interior conversion of those second-floor residential units for an expansion of the salon. This was considered back in 2001. The Zoning Board of Appeals granted a variance of 5 parking spaces. And this commission approved a more extensive plan at that time that it contemplated exterior alterations to the building, which are not, obviously that plan never went forward at that time. This particular plan is just for an interior alteration to convert those 3 residential units to an expansion of the existing salon that's on the first floor.
Thank you. Any motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Alessi, second by Commissioner Jacobson. Any discussion on the item? No? Everybody's okay?
Think it's a good idea?
Just make one-
Commissioner Barrett?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably okay with the application. I'll just say that, I don't know, just a question, how did that original parking ever get approved? I mean, the spaces in front of this building are like practically halfway in the Post Road. They're definitely not full parking spaces.
No, they don't. Those spaces, if you look at the survey, they don't count towards their allotment of parking spaces.
Okay.
If the town, for example, saw fit to put a curb there out farther into the right-of-way and convert those perpendicular spaces to parallel spaces, the town could do so.
Okay.
But those spaces in front of the building, which I assume are the ones you're
Yep.
talking about, do not contribute to the requisite parking spaces
Okay.
required for this building.
Because they don't look like legal, they look unsafe to me and. not-
They've been there,
They've been
again,
there
it's an
forever.
older building,
Yes.
we've got examples of that in some other locations,
Right.
but in general, those spaces don't count towards their considered on-site parking.
Okay.
Anything else? Take a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Item carries unanimously. Next item on our agenda is number 5, subdivision. This is 537 Reed Street, subdivision application of John Sabo for 2 lots in an A zone.
Okay, this application is an identical application to a 2-lot subdivision plan that was approved by this commission on February 15th of 2011. That original application did have a public hearing on February the 8th of 2011, and it was approved by this commission with conditions including concrete curbs and walks. The bond for that approval to secure the site improvements was never filed, therefore the final map for that subdivision was never recorded, therefore the approval lapsed. So this is an identical application, and what the applicant is requesting, it's discretionary on your part whether you have a hearing on this matter, and they're requesting you to review it without a hearing since there was a hearing held on the original 2011 application. So we can attest to the fact that the maps are in fact identical, so really the question here is whether you think to go back to a hearing is warranted here, or whether you're comfortable with proceeding in the absence of a second hearing.
Questions for staff?
I do have a question. When did we put in the regulation that increased the notification requirement for adjoining properties?
Good question. So basically, the question, whether the same property
Right.
owners would get notice and,
Right,
there
or
may
whether
be
there's people who didn't get notice, that.
I don't have that supplement in here, so I can't
Is
tell
it-
you
was
whether
it
that was
prior
before or
to-
after 2011.
That's what I was wondering.
I know that in a minimum, at that time, the abutting owners would have received notice.
Right.
And those all are the same abutters.
Right, I read that.
I can't tell you, sitting here, what the date that we adopted that 200-foot amendment would have been extended that notice from beyond the abutters to those within 200 feet.
Right.
I don't have the supplemental regs in here to tell me whether that was before or after 2011.
I think it was 2009,
Okay.
but I'm not sure.
I
Because we did the subdivision changes like the lot and square and stuff.
Yeah,
in
I want-
2009.
Yeah, I don't remember
thought it was-
voting on
I
it.
would-
I came on in 11.
I would
so-
agree that it was before that, so this would have been part of that, subject to that requirement at the
Okay.
time.
Thank you.
So the principal question here is whether we want to have another public hearing on the same application, which was approved previously. Is there any merit to confirming that indeed we're talking about, we think the regulations we're all pretty comfortable with that, but
Well, we can certainly, if that's critical to your decision, we can certainly hold that over until we can confirm that for you. But I can tell you that the abutters haven't changed.
If it's in this green document hasn't been updated since 2009.
Right.
If you find it in here, the notice section, it's...
Well, let me just give me one. Give me a second.
we just need a motion. If somebody wants to make a motion, we can keep talking about it.
No motion to not go to public hearing and just...
Well, I believe,
Mr. Barrett is correct. It was a 2009 amendment. So,
Okay.
so that requirement was in place in 2011 when this application was originally written.
okay, so point of clarification on what is before us. The motion would be to not require another public hearing?
No, it's, the application is pending. The choice really is whether you're comfortable acting on it administratively, having heard it in 2011, or whether you think a hearing is warranted before you take that action.
Yes, the hearing's not required.
Okay,
It's at your discretion.
all right.
I make
And
a
then, and then the application then would be on our next agenda as a, no, it's,
No,
go
this would
through.
just be-
we can act on it tonight. So that's my point. So the motion would actually be to approve the subdivision tonight and be done.
I make a motion to approve it without having a hearing
Okay.
and just approve it tonight.
Motion so we're doing this in two parts then? The first is whether to require a public hearing, and the second would be then to act on the application?
No, that's you can
Do it
just
all at once.
entertain a motion to
All right.
approve.
I make a motion to approve this
All right, Commissioner Alessi's made a motion to approve.
subdivision.
Second by Commissioner Kennelly. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Jacobson?
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, no.
I would not approve this motion, that we have new commissioners on the commission, and it is, I think we should follow the rules. I mean, the extension's expired, and I think if we do this, we set a precedent, so I would not support this.
Well, just for point of clarification, the subdivision regulations don't require a hearing here. So a hearing is discretionary on your part. If you've got a new street or a subdivision with 5 or more lots, the regs require a hearing. For less than that, it's discretionary, so there's no requirement that there be a hearing held.
Because,
So you're not
Yeah, that's-
setting any precedent or waiving any
but
requirement.
the
Okay.
distinction there is because it was originally a first cut, right?
Right.
So it didn't need one then,
I understand.
right? And so because it lapsed now, even though it's the same,
It's still a first cut.
but it's actually their second application.
Right.
Which is why then it becomes subject to our discretion, and
Okay.
why it's on our
I
agenda.
understand, thank you.
Commissioner Alessi?
The reason I believe this, or I understand this expired, is because the landowner couldn't sell the property. You know, we had a terrible real estate recession here in Fairfield, and I don't think we should put this landowner, through any more expenses. It's been approved by this commission, the neighbors are aware of the subdivision, and I suggest, you know what, we just move it along. And I believe that this is market-driven, why this thing has been expired and coming before us today, other than any other reason.
Commissioner Barretts, and then Commissioner Neely?
I would agree, hey, I would say, I don't even like approving subdivisions, but the fact is, we approved this one before. As far as like whether we generally have a public hearing on subdivisions. They're required on re-subdivision, they're not required on subdivision, but we generally have one. But the facts here are that we did have one in 2011, it was approved. We're acting in an administrative capacity. The plans have not changed. I mean, I have to just defer to staff on that. I don't remember the facts of this two-lot subdivision. And the only other thing would be, have the conditions changed in town or on the road or anything? And I don't believe they have. I drove there, I saw it, I say, if it met our requirements in 2011, those haven't changed, it still meets it. To me, this is an administrative decision, so I agree with Commissioner Alessi.
Yeah, and I will say too, and it's in the staff comments that I submitted to you, but I didn't articulate it, that the recent amendments to the lot frontage requirements that this commission made are not implicated here, as this is a corner lot, and both lots have the adequate frontage pursuant to the revised regulation. We would, if you see fit to approve this, we would recommend implementing the same conditions of approval that were put in place on the original approval, which were, concrete curbs, sidewalks, and driveway aprons. There's a portion of the garage that has to be demolished, but the same conditions that we, and those are articulated in the packet that we provided.
Commissioner Jacobson?
My main concern was the neighbors. If they were notified, then I guess I would support going through with this, as long as it follows our current regs, and I guess I'd support it.
Commissioner?
Yes, Commissioner Calabrese?
I wasn't on the commission in 2011. I believe that this should go back to public hearing. I'm not going to support this.
Anyone else? Are we ready for a vote? All right. The motion on the table is to approve the subdivision without a public hearing. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Nay with Commissioner Calabrese. Any abstention? The item carries.
Join the 6 to 1 club.
The next item is public hearing, so I'll close the executive session. Call the meeting back to order. This is the public hearing. We have 2 items on our agenda. Three items on our agenda. The second of which is for a bond release. I would entertain a motion to take these items out of order and take item number 2 first. Yes.
Make a motion to move item number 2 in the public hearing to move to number 1.
Motion by Commissioner Canelli, second by Commissioner Alessi. Any discussion on the item? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, abstentions, items carried unanimously. First item for public hearing is 2221 Cross Highway, Wellington Drive. Request of Attorney Jankowski for 100% release of a $12,910 bond pertaining to subdivision improvements in a AAA zone.
Represent Darren and Louise Canfield. This was a 2-lot subdivision.
Is it on?
It's not on.
On top, there's a switch on top of it. There you go. Now you're on TV.
You're welcome. I represent Darren and Louise Antill. This was a 2-lot subdivision, consisted of an existing house, and then they subsequently built a new house. Both of those houses have long been sold. We have completed all of the in-common improvements. Engineering department has signed off on the bond release. We have contributed, I believe it was $24,500 in lieu of open space, and I would request that the commission approve a final bond release.
Staff, do we have confirmation of all that in file?
We do. We have a memo from engineering dated December 3rd that they are recommending.
Thank you.
Motion to approve bond list. Oh, I'm sorry.
Very good. Anything more?
No,
Very good.
thank you.
Turn it over to the public. Does anyone have any comment on the request for release, 100% release of bond, 2221 Cross Highway? No? Hearing none? Attorney Jankowski, all set? Very good. Close. Public hearing on 2221 Cross Highway is closed. Second item on our agenda is 54 Sasko Hill Road, special permit and social site plan application of Love Where You Live Homes LLC pertaining to the construction of a mixed-use commercial and residential building in a designed commercial district. This is continued from December 10th, 2013. Just by way of some background, we had the applicant's presentation on December 10th. The applicant concluded, is that right?
Correct, Chairman.
And so now we are at the public hearing phase of this hearing. Any member of the public is free to comment. Please just raise your hand. It has to be recognized. There's no time limit, but we ask that you keep your comments to a relevant zone, and we'll try to conclude things here tonight.
Unless the commission has any questions about the application with regard, which could, I'm certainly willing to be all ears.
Nope. All right. Does any member of the public wish to be heard on this application? Attorney Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, staff. My name is Joel Green. I practice law in Bridgeport with the law offices of Green and Gross. I reside in Fairfield, and it's my pleasure to appear before you this evening on behalf of the Sasko Hill Neighborhood Association, on behalf of Steve Susik and Bill and Christine Mallon. Now, as you may recall, the Sasko Hill Neighborhood Association was initially formed in response to the application by One Sasko on the corner of Sasko Hill and Post Road, and it's an association formed by residents living on Sasko Hill Road, Overhill Road, Penfield Place, Southfield Road, Northfield Road, Tide Mill Terrace, Harbor Road, and Sasko Hill Terrace, and it is now in fact a Connecticut non-stock corporation. It is dedicated to the improvement, protection, preservation, and beautification of the Sasko Hill neighborhood. Steve Susik lives at 54 Sasko Hill Road, 56 Sasko Hill Road, and is an abutter to the property that is the subject of this application. And Bill and Christine Mallon live at 66 Sasko Hill Road, and they are residents that reside within 100 feet, and therefore are aggrieved by this application statutorily by virtue of living that close to it, and so they're directly affected and aggrieved as a matter of law. You may recall the history of One Sasko and the involvement of the Sasko Hill Neighborhood Association, and you heard an awful lot during that application, and I know there are new members on the commission, and we spend a lot of time talking about character and 25.7.7 of your regulations, which speaks of one of the standards for approval of a special permit, and it specifically requires that the development shown on the site and architectural plans be of such a character as to harmonize with the neighborhood, to accomplish a transition in character between areas of unlike character, to protect property values in the neighborhood, to preserve and enhance the appearance and beauty of the community, and to avoid undue traffic congestion. And if you knew the history of that project, we spent so much time talking about the character and the beauty of the neighborhood, and how initially that application was not consistent with those principles, and ultimately it culminated, and there was similarly the Christian application, and ultimately they culminated in an application that was really largely a collaboration. And certainly this commission heard the Sasko Hill Neighborhood Association had heard the application, gave this a lot of thought, and it resulted in a project that is really a successful outcome for all involved, including the town. It's a win-win, and it certainly, under the circumstances, is one that is in character. So having come this long way, and having spent all this time and effort as an association, I think that the members of the association were stunned by this application in terms of its appearance. And I think you're going to hear a lot tonight about, once again, character and transition and that sort of thing, because I think you'll find the consensus of my clients is that it does not accomplish that purpose. But more significantly, I don't really think that you need to get to that. And the reason I don't think you need to get to that is because the plan simply does not conform to the basic standards and requirements of your regulations. In the statement of use, the applicant says, the applicant seeks to construct a mixed-use building composed of a first-floor office use containing 3,250 square feet and a second-floor residential unit containing approximately 2,850 square feet. The current office building will be demolished and 15 parking spaces will be provided. And then the applicant says, no variances are required, and the proposal is well below lot coverage and floor area limitations. And we will demonstrate this evening that that is simply not true. And with all due respect, the application is really incomplete. It contains a series of inaccuracies and errors, frankly. And once again, it's non-compliant. I have some materials that I'd like to share with the commission. I'm not sure I have enough complete sets for everyone's sitting.
There's something right there too. Did you give a copy to?
I saved one.
Visual aids, huh?
So I'll move this right along, but you'll see that in the materials that I've provided, the first item that's in the materials and is, I've highlighted section 31.2.21, and that deals with lot area and shape. And what I have up here on the board is the grid. It's simply an enlargement of this grid that's on the main site plan. And I just want to highlight a few of the issues. First of all, in the definition of the regulations, and I've highlighted it, is section 31.2.21 sets forth the minimum standards in our zoning regulations for lot area and shape. And it says, in determining compliance with the minimum lot area and shape requirements of the zoning regulations, land subject to underground easements may be included, but no street or highway, easement for vehicles, or easement for above-ground public utilities other than easement serving a private residence may be included. So the first comment I have is I note that in the calculation that the applicant used, they did not, and there's a little equation up here, and you'll see that on your site plan, there's an equation up here that nets out some area below the one-year flood line, one-year tidal line elevation. And they net that out, but there is an easement. The property that is the subject of this application is in fact encumbered by an easement. I provided the commission with a copy of the deed containing the easement, and it's attached to the regulation. It's set forth in volume 4808 at page 283 of the Fairfield Land Records, and it reserves to the owner of, actually to Mr. Susik's property, he has an easement to pass and repass over this property. So the area of that vehicular easement should have been netted out of the overall square footage of the property. That wasn't done, so therefore this existing conditions and proposed number on the grid is therefore not accurate. But then the section goes on, and it says, the portion of a lot which has a width of less than 50% of the minimum lot square width in the district in which it is located shall not be included in the lot area calculation. So once again, it says that when you calculate lot area, if any portion of your property is less than that 50-foot minimum square that has to fit into your property, that it cannot be included in your lot area calculation. I included a red piece of acetate in your package. If you take this red piece of acetate is 1/2 of the minimum square for the district in which this property is located, the design commercial. It is, the minimum square is 75 feet. That's shown right here. Minimum square on lot is 75 feet. Half of that would be 37 and a half feet. And this, using the 10 scale that the plan had, is just that. And if you take that and superimpose it on the plan, you'll see that this portion of the property is not 37 and a half feet wide. It's less. It's like 34 feet. Therefore, and you can use that on the site plan that you have, that you were supplied with the full-size site plan, to show that this narrow waste area, that's W-A-I-S-T, waste area, cannot be used in calculating the area for the minimum lot area. But more significantly, the next sentence says, this provision is not intended to exclude the area between two intersecting property lines that meet at an angle equal to or greater than 60 degrees. So that doesn't really apply because we're not talking about lines that meet. We're talking about property lines that are opposite each other. So it specifically applies in this instance. Now the next sentence is the important one. All contributing portions of a lot for purposes of minimum lot area shall be contiguous, meaning that no contributing area of a lot shall be separated by non-contributing areas of the lot. So what you see on this property is it's somewhat hourglasses, and I call it the waste, but this area of the property is only 34 feet wide. Therefore, from this line and to the east, none of that property, and I have a drawing here. This shows the vehicular easement, but this shows the point where the property becomes 37 and a half feet wide. So none of this area of the property counts towards the calculation of lot area. So therefore, this figure of existing and proposed is completely inaccurate. The actual measured lot area pursuant to the regulations, I wasn't able to calculate it because I don't have this on a computer that would measure that, and I tried to do a rough area calculation, but it was too awkward. But in other words, the only area of the property then that counts towards the area of the lot, or the minimum lot area, is this area right in here, which is obviously significantly less than is represented.
Question, Commissioner Barrett?
Yeah, you said there's what's road. Do you have any idea? I mean, they represent the proposed conditions to be 11,786 feet. The minimum is 10,000.
It's way less than 10.
You think it'll be less than 10?
Oh, I'm positive of that. It's something on the order of I believe when you net this out, it's on the order between 6,000 and 7,000 feet, the actual lot area.
So not just, you say not just it's inaccurate, it's actually.
Oh, it's
the lot area shape doesn't meet
Right, and that renders the lot area non-compliant, and so you get into issues of trying to expand a non-conforming structure on a lot that is not conforming.
right, that's the existing conditions, that's the size of the lot.
Correct, but
Today,
the applicant showed it as meeting or exceeding the minimum lot area, but I'm certain that it doesn't do that by several thousand square feet. The next issue that I'd like to bring to the attention of the commission are setbacks. The applicant, you'll see that 12.7.6.2 deals with side property line setbacks. I provided you with a copy of that regulation, and I highlighted it in yellow. And what it says in the design commercial district for setbacks is it says 0 on one side and not less than 10 feet on the other side. So what the applicant did was they built a structure that is sideline. They show it, the minimum they show is 0 and 10. In other words, on one boundary it can be on the property line and the other one is 10 feet. They show existing as 2.3 and 17.5. Their proposal is 0 and 10.9, so just under 11 feet. So in other words, they propose to build a building that is hard up against the property line to the north and 10.9 feet from the south. Unfortunately, it appears that the applicant did not consider the following. First of all, 12.7. Well, let's begin with 12.7.6.6 because that's an easy one. The applicant shows that the height of their building proposed is 39 feet, right there, 39 feet. If you read 12.7.6.6, it says any building or other structure or portion thereof exceeding a height of 30 feet shall be set back 1 foot in addition to the applicable minimum setback requirement for each 3 foot or fraction thereof by which such building or other structure or portion thereof exceeds 30 feet in height. Therefore, this structure is 39 feet. Therefore, there has to be an additional 3 feet of setback. I've drawn a line which you probably can't see, but there's a red line here. So the 0 setback on the north side of the property, you have to add 3 feet. Therefore, based on the height of the structure, it had to be 3 feet off the north property line. Similarly, this property line to the south, the proposed is 10.9, and that obviously is not the 13 feet that it has to be by virtue of the height. Therefore, the building does not conform with the side lot requirement.
Right, and I think based upon what you're just pointing out there, if they did have to have 3 and 13, the building wouldn't fit? Would the building fit?
This building would not fit.
That's what I mean.
That's
Like
correct.
as planned.
The building is too big.
The building is too big.
It encroaches on both side yards, and therefore they would need a variance to build this building. But more troubling yet is section 12.7.6.4, which deals with adjacent residence district boundary. As you know, this property is in a design commercial district, but it borders on an A residence district. Therefore, your regulations say setback shall be 10 feet or the same as that of the adjacent residence district setback requirement, whichever is greater. On the next page, or 2 pages later, I provide you with section 5.2.4. As to setbacks, this is from the residential, I'll call the residence standards section of the regulations. You go down to residential district A, and you'll see, unfortunately I had to highlight both sides the way my computer worked, but if you look at the center column, it requires 7 feet, but the sum of the setbacks from the 2 side lot lines shall not be less than 20 feet for buildings of 1 story and not less than 25 feet for buildings of more than 1 story. So the residential requirements then require, while you can have 7 on one side, you have to have a total of 25 feet in side yard setbacks when you're bordering on a residential zone. Now, you might interpret that as only being the boundary line on one side of the property. I don't read it that way, but under either, and once again, going back to the other section, it says whichever is greater, so the 10 feet would prevail. But if you rely on the residential standard for the A zone, then the building is dramatically too big based on the side yard requirements.
How wide is it at that point, in any event, from property line to property line?
It's not. The overall width of the lot and its widest point is 59 feet. Call it 58 feet. And so it would be very difficult to build a building that complies with that requirement. And I can't say it couldn't be done, but one thing I can say is that this building doesn't begin to comply with the side yard requirements. The next issue is, and actually I'm a little out of order because the next part you have is the requirements for approval, but I want to jump that and go to the next document that I provided you with is from section 12.6 that deals with the design districts. And it says that off-street parking or loading areas which extend under all or a portion of a building or other structure more than 10 feet shall be enclosed. Therefore, in this case, as you're aware, and you know, one of the frustrating things with these documents and the plan was the only elevation. Your regulations require complete construction drawings and architectural drawings and elevations, and it seems that the applicant mostly provided renderings, sort of pictures of the building. I mean, this was the closest thing. Each elevation is the closest thing that was supplied by the applicant in terms of what I'll call an architectural standard drawing here. But as you can see from the other drawings that the applicant submitted, the parking area extends under the entire structure, and it certainly extends more than 10 feet under the structure. And therefore, the parking has to be enclosed. In this case, it's wide open, and so that violates section 12.6. But that requirement is echoed in section 28.10 of your regulations, which deals with parking standards. And I provided you with a copy of 28.10, and it says, except for necessary driveway entrances and, except for, that's a different, sorry about that. Let me go to the next page, 28.10.1. Except for single-family houses in flood zones where the regulations require the first habitable floor well above the ground elevation and the area between that floor and ground elevation enclosed with breakaway walls, off-street parking or loading areas which extend 10 feet or more under all or a portion of a building or other structure shall be enclosed. So that contains that same requirement that the parking, if you're going to have an elevated structure and part of the parking area extends 10 or more feet under the building, it has to be enclosed. Now, our regulations distinguish between parking spaces and parking areas. And this was something that I took some time to look at because I've heard the argument made, well, these parking spaces only extend 9 feet under the building, but there's a distinction. Parking spaces are specifically defined, and if you look in section 28 of our regulations, there are specific regulations that relate to parking areas and specific regulations that relate to parking spaces. Parking spaces is a specifically defined term, or there's a standard for it, and clearly each of these regulations, the one in 12.6 and 12.6 and in 28.10.1, each refer to parking areas. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. If you have an elevated building, I think architecturally you would not want an entire parking area to be wide open with cars kind of half in and half out, particularly where you're bordering on a residential neighborhood. And folks like the Mallons and the Susiks have to live right next door and look at it. I did include 28.10, I see what happened. On page 111, I did provide you with a copy of section 28.10. It provides that except for necessary driveway entrances and except for parking spaces provided in connection with a dwelling or leased rooms in a dwelling, all off-street parking and loading spaces shall maintain a minimum setback of 10 feet from any street line. This is the 10-foot line. We'll note that there's office space numbers 14 and 15. They are within the 10-foot setback, therefore they do not comply with the regulations. I suppose there could be some sort of juggling reconfiguring the spaces, but as the plan sits, it's in the setback. Because of the lack of sort of detail, architectural elevations, it's hard to tell what the openings are, what the height of the opening is. I think there may have been a question asked at the last session, right? And that's something that we've talked about before. And I think in this case there was a discussion of the FedEx truck or the UPS truck, but I'm equally concerned with emergency vehicles and that sort of thing. And I don't think that the commission could find what the height is from these plans of entering under the structure, but it seems pretty apparent. I think I found that I had scaled this, but I think I found that it was like this facade. I don't understand. This is showing the east elevation, which presumably faces Sasko Hill Road, and it's difficult to understand what the opening is or what the height is. But I couldn't tell what the opening height is, but obviously there's an issue in terms of safety and traffic if every single vehicle, delivery vehicle where you have an office, and every single FedEx truck, UPS truck, delivery truck, anyone coming into the property has to back out onto Sasko Hill Road 170 feet from the intersection. And as you'll hear tonight, there is a significant traffic problem in the mornings on Sasko Hill Road exiting in terms of cars stacked up. Therefore, getting in and out of this site with a truck would be a significant challenge. Before I talk about the standards for approval, and I note that Attorney Whitney's here this evening as well, and we'll address those standards. My clients would like an opportunity to address the commission. I'd like to call upon Mr. Susik, and he has some remarks. Actually, if I could prevail upon Mr. Susik, hold on for one moment. I'd like to introduce Jack Franzen first, and I think that would be a better sequence. And Jack Franzen is a founder and principal of J.P. Franzen Architects, and you're all familiar with his outstanding work in town. I'm interested in hearing his thoughts about this as well.
I have some renderings that I did. I think I have 13 copies.
You never know.
You got one for attorney review?
If there's not enough, I can...
We'll share. There is a copy.
All the way down at the end. No.
This is my listing right here. It says this
Take one, so.
Good evening. My name is Jack Franzen. My office is at 95 Harbor Road. And so my view from my front door of my office is directly opposite the site. And I'm here tonight to express my concerns about the visibility and the appearance of the proposed building. I believe that there are currently about 15 structures on or around the Tide Mill Pond. And they're all mid to late 20th century designs with the exception of a couple 19th and 18th century outliers. The proposed structure has nothing in common with any of these structures as to color, fenestration, roof design, or material. Its prominent location at the head of the pond will draw attention to that. I have the handout that I passed out to you to illustrate my point. There are three views, as would be seen walking out of my front door of my office. And the first one is looking at the Tide Mill Pond view as it is right now. And then the second one is the view with the rendering of the building superimposed into it. And I realize it's not scientifically created. I did take the rendering that was online, and I think the angle's not right, but I think the scale and certainly the colors are right.
And so you went to, there's a website where the rendering on the TPZ site?
Yes.
You got it from the materials and
Yes.
copied and pasted it into the photo.
And I'm not very proficient at that. But then the last one would be just to kind of...
If I may, on the second one,
Mhm.
what's the height of the existing commercial building that's immediately behind it, do you know?
It's 2.5 stories.
2.5, so,
Yeah.
you know, roughly 38 feet?
Something like that.
And what is the height of the proposed structure?
From what Attorney Green said, it's 39 feet, and I don't know how that was calculated. And in my rendering, it probably looks taller than it is because of the fact that it's in the foreground.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still a multi-story building.
Right, but you think I mean, reference-wise, it's going to look maybe a little bit larger because it's in the foreground, but it's approximately the same height as that building behind it.
That's my impression. And of course, the closer you get, the bigger it's going to look in relation to the things in the background. And I know that the judgment by this commission in lieu of strict architectural standards like the ones you have downtown is somewhat subjective. But I believe there is ample direction in the Town Plan of Conservation and Development to guide the commission in situations like this. And I would specifically cite section Roman numeral 3.2.1, which states the goal that to assure a satisfying community design through proper relationship of factors such as materials, scale, site, function, landscape, and location. And also section Roman numeral 2.9, stating that the goal is to emphasize the appearance standards and requirements for off-street parking. My advice to the applicant on this building would be to take a cue from the Tide Mill building, which is also a somewhat unusual building in the context of the mill pond. The Tide Mill has wood siding and appropriately scaled fenestration, and it's got dark weathered wood exterior, which recedes and diminishes the mass of the building. And its large parking area is a stone wall, a very attractive one. And I think the Tide Mill building fits right in. And I would request that the commission vote against the current design until it's brought back in a form that's consistent with the Plan of Conservation and Development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Franzen. I'd now like to introduce Steve Susik.
Good evening. My name is Steve Susik. I'm the owner of 56 Sasko Hill Road. That is directly adjacent to the said property. I've got a garage right here, and I've got an additional parking spot right here. The current proposal, the way I see it, is they've got a fence that's coming up right about here, which is going to restrict my use of that lower parking spot that I currently have. I did check the records. Just to give you a brief history on this property. At one time, it was one big parcel. Both the property I have and 54 were one unit. This part of, basically this line here runs through mine, and that is the residential commercial district. Okay, so in 1980, that structure was used as a residential building. 1980, they went in front of the town, got a waiver to cease all residential use of this, we'll call it the professional office building, and that's when it became an office building at that time, 1980 timeframe. 1985 is when it got subdivided. One owner had both properties, or one property, subdivided, and it was sold off to the person I bought the property from, and since then, there's been about 2 owners on that. I just want to, on the...
To your recollection, have those lot lines changed at all over that time?
No. From the plot I saw in 1984-85 timeframe, that is the boundaries that were stated. Just want to read, this is from volume 667, page 119. It's planning and zoning document. This was when the residential use ceased and it became a doctor's office. And one of the conditions that were imposed by the town was that abandon any residential use of the premises situated in the business zone. So at that point in time, that became strictly commercial use. And then in the deed in 1985, when the land was subdivided, that's where I have the right of way to use the driveway here and also the parking area. So both of those were granted volume 737 and page 347. Now, this is a transitional property. The office space, it was intended for only professional office use. The town did, when they gave it the initial use as an office space, they told them to abandon all residential use. So I'm hoping that that still is, you know, the limitations on this property, since it's not officially a commercial area just because it doesn't meet all the requirements of the design commercial use. Some of the other issues I have is currently there's a row of trees. This is the current pavement, so this is the boundary of it. Up here is, we've got about a dozen or so trees that currently exist. So what's going to happen with the current proposal that's before you is this all becomes pavement. So you're going to have a significant increase in water runoff. And that water, if not design property, is going to go on my property and into the tide mill and into the sound. We both did get flooded during Sandy. That's one of the reasons this property was for sale. They've got, you know, the average height is 7 feet above sea level. So we tend to get flooded out in this lower section on I would say, a monthly basis. So there's a significant amount of drainage that needs to be engineered for this property to work. The other issue I have is when I drive out, I've got I drive in, then I have to back out because I only got 18 feet between the garage and the property line. So I've got to back out in order to go out forward. Somebody mentioned last time we met that it would be dangerous to back out, and that is true because there's an incline, a significant incline. There's a sign right here, there's some trees, there's some telephone poles, and it's very difficult to make a judgment call when you can proceed onto Sasko Hill Road. So I don't know if it's possible to elevate this area here. You're coming out more on an even plane with Sasko Hill. Right now you're coming up at a significant angle, and for me at least, it's very difficult to see oncoming traffic coming off the post road. So I'm obviously opposed to the current proposal that's before you. You know, the current design or the current structure that's there, mostly people that come over, they think it's a residential building, you know, a residential home. No one has come and asked, oh, that's a commercial building and its use. I mean, currently there's no lights on the property for a parking area. This office building at one time, until recently, had the same water main as the residential house that was on it. So they coexisted kind of in harmony. And I think that was the current structure is a perfect transitional structure in this, going from commercial to residential. So my recommendation to the board, and, that you would deny this current applicant in this form.
Do we have copies of those documents you were just referencing?
I've got a couple I can give you. If you need more, I can.
Well, at least one copy needs to be submitted to...
Those were the deeds, right? Yep. I think those were in the packet that Attorney Green passed out.
It's 4808, yeah, you're right.
Is it the same?
It's on page, it's 4808, 284. Pages 3, 4, and 5.
Okay. So these deeds...
Yep.
They're different, but we can we have a copy for the record, we can make a copy.
Okay, you got a copy for the record, for our record? Because that doesn't look like this.
No, I just received it.
Okay, very good. And did Attorney Rizzio get a copy then?
I'm good.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, Bill Mallon would like to address the commission.
Hi, my name is Bill Malin, representing myself, my wife Christine. We're at 66 Sasco Hill Road. We abut Steve's property, and I won't be too long, but I want to get a little more personal about this as opposed to all the facts and figures, because I actually think the facts and figures speak for themselves. This should be a commercial building. It should not be the size and scale that's proposed, so I totally support denying that proposal and coming back with something that fits into the neighborhood. The challenge for you is zoning. I've never been before zoning before. Is does this fit or does it belong? And it may fit at some point. I actually think it does not. But even redesigned, it may be reconfigured to fit. It certainly does not belong as currently designed. I believe at the December 10th meeting, with all due respect to the architect, I'm not sure he's here, said it was very colonial and nautical. I think it's nautical if you like cruise ships. It's not really befitting what I think the neighborhood is. I think Jack mentioned that, and I totally agree with him. I thought I'd get a little bit personal about this. You've seen a lot of drawings, but I'd like to show this. In other words, this is the view out of our dining room window. We're very fortunate. We have a beautiful house. It looks out on the mill pond. It's magnificent. We've looked down on this property for quite some time. And as Steve says, it fits. There's nothing wrong with this. Most people do think it's residential as opposed to commercial. That's 18 feet tall. You're talking about something that's twice that height, but would obliterate that gray building behind it. I certainly do not want to look out on that. I think it's going to seriously affect our own personal home value, and I think it seriously affects the neighborhood. So I am asking on behalf of my wife and myself for the zoning board to deny the current application and come forth with something that's a little more befitting. Traffic will be an issue. As Steve had said, it's tough getting out of his driveway. Mine's another 30 feet here, neighbor across the street here, and then the new building at 1 Sasco is right here. Hasn't even opened up yet. That's all going to meet within 30 feet of this property. I don't think that's a trivial issue. Somebody at the previous meeting had mentioned a garbage truck. How are you going to get down and get the garbage out? And I thought, boy, that's a good question. There's no way you're going to get down there and get garbage out and turn a truck around and come out. It's not going to fit. So I think traffic is something that the commission needs to pay attention to. It affects all houses on Mill Pond. I'm very appreciative that Jack came forth with it because he does have a beautiful view. And while he's not next to it, it certainly affects his view, and it certainly would affect ours. Lighting and landscaping are major issues. I cannot imagine what this is going to be if it was as proposed, with the lights coming out and without being totally blocked from a residential area. This is encroaching on Sasco Hill, and unfortunately, Steve and I are the ones that are right next to it. But this is not a good step to take. That's an acceptable commercial building. It doesn't look like one. It fits the neighborhood. Something along those lines, perfectly acceptable. Something along the lines of what's currently designed, I think is totally unacceptable. That's all I have to say, so thank you for your time. You can keep the picture.
Well, if you'd like it to be in the record, you need to submit a copy.
I get your big ones.
Anything further, Mr. Green, Attorney Green?
Yeah, just briefly. First of all, I think there was a question asked about the height, and the height is shown as 39 feet, and I think you'll find that in this elevation in the upper right of the site plan, you'll see that the height to the gable roof midline point is, based on zoning formulas, 39 feet. I think the height to the top of the main roof ridge, or I'm not sure whether this is pergola or what this is, but it's 44 2 3/4 inches. There's a projection that extends higher than that, so that's probably
Understood. All right, we got it.
48 or
We
50
have it.
feet, I don't know. So I provided the commission with the standards. You know, frankly, I was going to open my presentation with a story. I lost my courage, but I'm just going to give you the quick version. Is basically a house in my neighborhood sold, and it had a huge tree in the front yard. And so this summer, a lot of folks went on vacation. The new owner showed up, and one day the tree got cut down, and it was cut down about 8 or 10 feet above the ground. And I kind of watched this happen in 1 week. And so the tree gets cut down, and it's way off the ground. The stump is sticking way up. And then one day I come home from work, and the new residents had hired a wood carver, and they carved a bear out of this tree. And it's sitting in the middle of the front yard. So one of the neighbors who lives across the street comes home from vacation and walks up to the new neighbor and says, "I'm stunned." And the new neighbor says, "Isn't it great? I'm stunned too." And so my point in that is that, you know, the person who created it thought it was the greatest thing. I think the neighbor was sort of less enamored with it. And it's been kind of a source of discussion in our neighborhood. And it's been an interesting experience. And I think I started off by saying that my client, Sasko Hill Neighborhood Association, is stunned. But in this case, it's not... I think it's not necessarily the building in a vacuum, but it's the building in this place. And while they make chocolate and vanilla ice cream because we all have different opinions and we see beauty differently, I think in this case, this simply doesn't fit. I'm struck by the comments of Mr. Susick, Mr. Mallon, but most significantly from Jack Franzen, and based on his expertise and hearing just the comments he made on sort of changing the texture, changing the design, changing the look. These are the kinds of things that 25.7.7 specifically address in terms of that the plan shall be of such a character as to harmonize with the neighborhood to accomplish a transition in character. I think we can't disagree on the bear on this one. I think this simply doesn't fit in this neighborhood. And, you know, the Sasko Hill Neighborhood Association, I think, feels like the winner of the pie eating contest whose prize is more pie after fighting it out across the street as to character and harmonious design. So I know that Attorney Whitney has some comments on this as well. I know that the commission is very familiar with the standards. I think we've shown that it doesn't meet the zoning regulations and it doesn't meet many of the standards. And I will rest at this time. I don't know if the commission has any questions.
I don't believe we do. No, thank you, Attorney.
And we thank you for your patience and consideration.
Is there any other member of the public that wishes to be heard?
Good evening. I'm Diane Whitney from the law firm of Pullman and Comley, and I represent Sasko Associates LLC, which owns that gray building, the tip of which you could see, at 10 Sasko Hill Road. I will not repeat everything that Attorney Green said, but please understand that we adopt all of his arguments and agree with all of his conclusions.
So noted.
Pardon me?
So noted. Thank you.
But I do have a few more things, which I will go through very quickly. There are a few things I don't understand, and I would encourage you to ask the applicant. I understand that the present development of this site is considered a non-conforming use. and I don't understand how that fits into the application. Excuse me. Generally, a non-conforming use may not be enlarged. And if what is there now is a non-conforming use, this is dramatic enlargement, going from 16 feet high presently to 39 feet high, or 240% increase. Going, as far as ground floor area, 1,776 square feet to 3,250, 180% increase, or total floor area, a 240% increase. So I would encourage you to look into the role of the nonconformity as far as what is proposed now. As Attorney Green alluded, your special permit regulations, 25.7.5, state that the new use should not be detrimental to the neighborhood or the adjacent property. You certainly heard about how the residents consider it detrimental to their property. My client's property is not only the adjacent property, they are building on the property line. This is my client's property. Which means that you will have would have a very large building right on the property line, someplace between 10 and 14 feet. Our building is something between 10 and 14 feet from the property line. So 10 feet or 10 to 14 feet from our building would be this very large building. And my understanding from the rendering of the building is that the side that would face my client's building is completely blank. So suddenly, instead of looking out and having light in its windows, our building would be looking out at a very large, very blank wall. I will not go through all the figures that Attorney Green said, which he's absolutely correct. Section 25.7.7 speaks to the architectural style of the proposed building. We agree with the statements that you have heard that the architectural style of the proposed building does not at all fit in with either the homes or our client's building, which is constructed in a style that is compatible with the neighborhood. Generally, for a non-conforming use, the new non-conforming use, which might be allowed, is confined to the existing footprint of the present use. That certainly is not the case here, and we don't understand the discrepancy on that. The parking and the size of the building and its present use. Another question that was raised by, I believe, Mr. Susick. It is our understanding that there was some sort of prohibition put on this property some time ago that it could not be used residentially in the future. We have not been able to figure out the source of that, although you may now have that document. If that's true, of course, this doesn't work. And if this building were not largely the second and third floor residential, it certainly would also not work because the parking alone would defeat the ability for them to use the entire building commercially. The parking requirement would be much more extensive, and it simply won't fit. A question we also have is about drainage. This property, as we understand the plans, depends on 9 Cultec units to handle drainage on this site. Cultec units, which I'm sure you're familiar with, do not work unless the groundwater level is below the bottom of the Cultec units. I don't know whether you have received soil tests or engineering reports that establish that, in fact, these units would work. Given what seems to be a very high water table, it seems unlikely that they would. The issue about the delivery trucks backing in is certainly serious, and even more serious is the question of emergency access to this property. I don't know if your fire marshal has reviewed the plans, but as depicted now, they represent a serious emergency and fire hazard. I also don't know the status of the Coastal Commission approvals, or if this requires approval from DEEP, and where those stands. To sum up, and I'm trying to go very quickly because I know there are a lot of people here who would probably like to speak. What is proposed here is wedging a very large building on a small, inadequate lot, which will damage the residents in the neighborhood. It will damage our client's commercial building in the neighborhood. It is much too much building on much too small a lot. Our client, if approved, our client will absolutely appeal the approval, and I don't state that in terms of a threat. What I really state it for is to encourage the applicant to withdraw this application and come back with something that is much more in scale to the neighborhood and compatible with the neighborhood. We ask that you deny this application.
Thank you very much. Is there any other member of the public that wishes to be heard on this application?
Good evening. I apologize. I had to bring my computer, but I ran out of ink in my printer.
No problem at all.
So, first of all, I'd like to...
Can you state your name?
Yes. My name is Maisie Stanovich, and this year, 2014, will be the 100th year anniversary of when my grandfather settled at 57 Sasko Hill Road. So my family has lived there now 100 years. And what I'd like to do first is, my mother, who lived there because she married my dad, I'd like to read a letter that she wrote. She's 92. She would have come tonight, but she knows the meetings always run long, so she didn't want to have to stay up late.
You're reading into the record a letter from...
Yes, I'm reading a letter from my mother, whose name is Lucy Zdanovich, from 57 Sasko Hill Road, Fairfield, Connecticut. In October 1946, my residence was 57 Sasko Hill Road, Fairfield, Connecticut. Across the street, 56, 66, and 78 Sasko Hill Road were owned by Bill Stevenson. The rest of the property along Mill River was owned by the Miller family up to the intersection of Harbor Road. It was close to the water's edge and had many evergreen trees. In August 1955, we had a very bad storm, and Mr. Stevenson was out back in his hip boots to try to hold the lumber back so it would not float down the river. This is when he was reconstructing the 54 Sasko Hill Road building. It was originally a garage that he moved to the property as an outbuilding for his wife's art studio. So that's how that building began. When I-95 was being constructed, Mr. Stevenson had many truckloads of rock and boulders delivered. He used them to fill in the property. When Tide Mill Terrace was being constructed, he had La Rosa Construction Company deliver him truckloads of fill. When the Tide Mill construction was completed, he remodeled and rented the outbuilding as a home to Mrs. Goodsell. Because of the constant flooding, she moved to 78 Sasko Hill. The building was again used as an art studio and for storage, not as a residence. In 1980, Mr. Stevenson sold 56 Sasko Hill Road to John Costello, who was a chiropractor. The small building became his chiropractic office. Costello sold the land originally at 56 Sasko Hill as 2 parcels with a shared driveway, 54 as commercial and 56 as residential. A few years ago, the town of Fairfield laid a pipe along the Mill River bank. They filled it in a few more feet toward the river. The land has always been wetland and still floods from storms. This land is basically residential property with maybe a few feet of commercial property. The fact that 54 Sasko was allowed to be sold as a commercial property was not appropriate and a mistake, especially when it started out as an outbuilding garage and is now a 2,527 square foot building. Does the current structure have the appropriate land requirements to meet code now? It does not seem possible that there is enough land to justify a building, either commercial or residential, on this site. If you were to look at the town land maps in 1946, the physical property was quite different. The 56 Sasko Hill property should never have been subdivided. I am opposed to 54 Sasko being zoned as a mixed-use building. The proposed building will only bring more traffic to the area. The parking is very limited. The shared driveway is directly across the street from another shared driveway approved in 2013. Both shared driveways are a few feet from two different commercial property driveways. Yours truly, Lucy Stanovich.
Thank you. Would you mind emailing that or submitting a copy at some point for the file?
Sure, okay. And I just would like to make a few comments myself, okay? I'll keep it really short. Again, for the record, my name is Maisie Stanovich. First, the land itself. That land is really tidal wetlands. Filled in during the 1950s with truckloads of debris during the construction of I-95 and the residential development of Tide Mill Terrace. There were no permits or town-sanctioned approvals for those kinds of actions in the 50s. It just happened. When the town fathers drew the demarcation line for commercial property, you know, so many feet off of the post road, this land was not buildable. I mean, at that time, when that line was drawn, the fill wasn't there. You couldn't have built anything on that particular piece of land because it was wetlands. So in my opinion, a mistake was made. The landfill should, number one, never have been allowed in the 50s. It was, so there it is. But in the 80s, 1980s, when they split the property to allow both commercial and residential, it was really done because it was a chiropractor in a sole practitioner office, and there were variances and conditions that were required when they made this approval. So I can see how it happened, but I don't think it was the intent even in the 1980s that in the future some huge megastructure would be okay to be built on that site. So now we're at 2014, like 35 years later, and now this super mega structure is being proposed. And I say, how could this be legal? I mean, it started off on fill from I-95, and that's what bothers me. It's like I don't really know how it can be continued, how a mistake or something that should have never happened in the first place can continue to just go on and on and on. And I realize that because my mom is still alive, and I was a child, but you would know all this. You would know that that was all filled in, and it was all filled in. So, quickly, the driveways. There are so many driveways when you come up to Sasko Hill, and there is so much traffic that it is really a problem. I, unfortunately, myself, have been involved in an accident where I got rear-ended on Sasko Hill in that area 2 years ago, and I have been personally suffering. There's a lawsuit. It's a whole big ordeal. So I can attest to the fact, and that was on a Saturday afternoon at noontime, that it's a really tough area at the bottom of Sasko Hill. Secondly, this past Sunday, 2 days ago, I was coming up Sasko Hill. I was right in front of where these driveways are, and I was doing between 20 and 25 miles an hour, and someone, to my astonishment, in an SUV, black, passed me on the left in the double line zone because I was going too slow. I mean, I was only just into Sasko Hill Road, and they passed me. So there's a lot of impatience that goes on. Last but not least, in the mornings, I will tell you now that the traffic goes, people trying to get out of Sasko Hill onto the post road will go all the way up to almost over Hill Road, dead stopped, waiting to go through the light. So that's, I mean, that all needs to be addressed. So I'd just like to leave you with that the driveways, the traffic, and please, in all future applications, really consider the land that this is being built on, whatever they want to build there, and whether or not that's really legal to continue on land-filled dirt, wetlands. So, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else, a member of the public that wishes to be heard?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Dr. William Kiefner is here, and if we could accommodate him, I think it would be greatly appreciated. Can we get a microphone to him there? There you go.
I'm Dr. Bill Kiefner, and I'm manager and prior owner of the Tide Mill, and I've been living there, and also I've been there for about 60 years. And I'm looking up the mill pond at this, what rendering of this architecture is very objectionable. And one thing I wanted to say that the mill pond is historically very important because it was built by at this part of the reservoir for the Tide Mill when 30 years before the Revolutionary War, and the miller was able to use the Tide Mill pond when the tide went down so that he could grind grain for the colonists. And it's important that we try to maintain the character of the residential area around the pond as much as we can, and make a gentle transition to the commercial area. And so I hope that you will deny this proposition. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, John. Is there any other member of the public that wishes to be heard on this application? Sure. Yes, please. Just go ahead and take the podium and state your name and address for the record, if you don't mind.
Is this okay?
Yes.
My name is Cy Israel. I live at 569 Sasko Hill Road. That's the first time I've ever attended a town meeting. I've owned my home there for 30 years. I'm familiar with this house as it stands. I'm an attorney, and I spent many years at the firm of Kleban at Seymour, which is one building in from the Post Road heading towards Westport. And from the back of that building, this building is part of the view. It really is a very nice view. I'm surprised to see this application because I'll tell you that in all of the storms that we observed, the tide would really go into this building. I mean, this was, you would watch it in awe that how could this little building even exist there as an office with the water coming in that way. So I don't know what approvals you've gotten from the Title Commission, but I can tell you that at any storm at high tide, that is a flooded piece of property. The other thing about the traffic at the bottom of this hill is a real problem. We now have a new building that was built. It's just about to open, I guess probably within a few months. And there'll be offices there, there'll be retail there, there's a functioning bank. This is right at the corner. Even as we go now, if you want to make a left turn off of Sasko Hill Road onto the Post Road, it gets backed up. You got to remember that Sasko Hill Road leads up to Oldfield. And when I-95 gets backed up, I have a little problem with my voice, excuse me. When I-95 gets backed up, traffic comes off of I-95 onto the Post Road, up Sasko Hill Road, onto Oldfield. That's a new way of getting past the town. Heading in the other direction, the left turn, it's only a few years ago there was no light there at all. But what's happened now is that you see cars rather than waiting for the light, go into the parking lot of 1 Sasko Hill Road to get out of, there's a left into the parking lot, and then you can make a right out of the parking lot onto the Post Road. And you see that all the time. It's a very dangerous situation. I can't imagine that this little area and the property itself can handle any further commercial property. I can't imagine that this would be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there any other member of the public who wishes to be heard? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is George Russell. I'm the president of the Sasquatch Association, the neighborhood association in Southport. And I'm here tonight to speak in support of the Sasquatch Hill Neighborhood Association and the adjoining neighbors and all the neighbors in their opposition to this application. I believe they made some very good points, and to avoid redundancy, let's just say that we agree with their position and that we urge you to deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment.
Good evening, Gaylord Meyer, District 1. I have received a few phone calls from the neighbors that live on Harbor and on Sasko, and they are very concerned about this massive application that's before you tonight. It's interesting, I too will keep it short. The traffic is a problem, but I also think that it is not in the seascape, it's not in harmony. And this Southport Village is historic, and we are trying to maintain it, and we are slowly being encroached by developers trying to change the harmony of our village. Someone referenced to this building as looking like a carnival ship. I concur. It is totally out of place, and the neighbors would like you to deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public wish to be heard on this application? Yes, sir.
My name is Will Waldron. I'm here representing the Southport Conservancy, and I'd like to also confirm that we are in support of the various people who have indicated that they would like you to deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Going once, twice. All right, very good. Attorney Rizzio, rebuttal.
Chairman, once again, members of the commission, happy to be before you tonight representing this application. And I'm at a kind of an awkward spot, so I'll look for some guidance from the commission. Part of the, I apologize for having to have you sit through the analysis of by everyone. The morning after our last hearing, I emailed Attorney Green and asked to please sit down. We understand there were some concerns with regard to size, with regard to design and everything else. And I was simply told that there was too many individuals, too many community groups, and that they were not interested in sitting down and discussing any modifications to the plans, which left me in a precarious position of either withdrawing and not knowing what the problems were, or sitting through the last hour and a half to figure out what we would have to do. I was hoping to avoid that. I wasn't able to avoid it, and hence I'm here. So this shouldn't, normally don't like things to play out like this, but this, I was given no choice, and I just wanted the commission to understand that. We are receptive to the community, we are receptive to their neighbors, but until tonight, we never, other than hearing supposedly too big and not happy with the architecture, nowhere to go. So with that, we take this as an educational process for us, and I apologize that you would have had to sit through this because it's something that should have been done prior to a public hearing. With regard to the application itself, Attorney Green, I believe we're in compliance with your regulations. I think there's a lot of subjectivity, which I think this commission will struggle with based on my appearing before the commission again. With regard to the just minimum standards so that I know we can be able to move forward, is with regard to Attorney Green's calculation of the lot area. The lot area calculation, the whole determination with regard to what's included and what's not included in lot area is for a specific determination to determine if it's a lot. This lot is a pre-existing, it's a pre-existing lot, so it does not have to qualify for lot area. In other words, we can build in there as long as we meet the setbacks and we meet all the other guidelines. And we went through this with the zoning department, that this is a pre-existing lot, and all of the calculations, the regulations specifically, because I want to understand, we're not going away. And the reason, and that we do comply with the ability to come before you, because lot area is if we were to try to subdivide this lot into two things, we would have to take into account all those calculations with regard to lot width and deductions and all that. This lot stands on its own. This lot is zoned commercial. It's not zoned residential, so therefore we have the ability to make an application. This historical requirement that there not be residential requirement in a previous zoning approval is irrelevant because we're tearing the building down. So in effect is we have in a design commercial district, we have a lot that is pre-existing non-conforming. We have to meet the setbacks, we have to meet the height, we have to meet the coverage. With regard to the coverage, we're 50% of what the coverage, less than 50% of what the building coverage could be in a design commercial district. We can't lose sight of the fact of what this is zoned. This commission has had the ability to change the zone, they've had the ability to do whatever they want with it, but it's commercial. We now have to, our charge, especially after hearing the concerns of the public, which I assume would be concerns of this commission because you are very receptive to the concerns, is to make this transition where we have a commercial zone, commercial property, and make a transition into a residential neighborhood smooth and reasonable. Now keep in mind, the building next door to us is 17,000 square feet, okay? So we're not hindered, as Mr. Mallon was saying, like what's there now is appropriate. We're never going to be, we're not restricted, we won't be restricted, and I don't think your regulations ever restrict you to leaving something that looks like that. No one has a site easement, no one has control over the air rights of this property. What controls this property is the zone and a sort of subjective requirement of this commission to get a feel that the applicant has done what it's could to make this, to make a transition where it abuts a residential area. I could stand here for an hour and pick apart each and every one of those things. What I would rather do, if it's appropriate for the commission, is we would like to continue this matter. We would agree to resubmit plans that are smaller in scale. No, we didn't need a variance, which is still correct in what I said in my presentation. You do have the ability to waive certain parking requirements. In other words, in a mixed use, you can waive spot. You can also waive the requirement of parking spaces not be within 10 feet.
No, I remember you asked for a waiver with regard to the 2 parking spaces at the edge of the
And
property.
the 10 feet in the front.
Thank
So, if the commission, now that we have the input of the public, which we requested earlier, we would be able to, in effect, I believe, shrink the size of our building, bring it more in a, which we thought was a...
Why don't we do this? Because
Yeah.
now it sounds like you're starting to get into some of that negotiation posture in terms of what might be amenable.
Oh, I don't want to negotiate. We understand, we're not looking to negotiate. I understand what we think is appropriate now. We understand there's a concern about size. We understand there's a concern about architecture, although I don't think your regulations govern architecture. There's no architectural review board. But I believe we could bring a building more colonial in nature, to what traditionally is more colonial in nature, and more consistent with a transitional phase, and resubmit that to the commission at another hearing.
I don't want to get into another issue of, substantial modification or whatever. You want to continue the public hearing, and over the course of the next couple of weeks, you'll have a dialogue, and you can tell us whether or not you're going to withdraw and resubmit, or going to go forward with the, your rebuttal to close the hearing.
Sure.
And you can figure out what do you want to do.
Yeah, that's what I prefer to do. And, we can always withdraw the application, not at a public hearing. I can do that by letter directly to Attorney Devon.
Well, that's what I mean.
But I would, if we can continue this, we would like to see what we can to bring, modify our elevations and plan to make it more comfortable.
So we'll continue the public hearing.
Correct.
So that you will have your options available to you.
Thank you.
But I will caution you that not to submit substantially revised plans for a building that looks remarkably different, because we're in rebuttal. And so then the public will not gain an opportunity for public comment on...
That sounds all right.
Substantially
I don't have a problem with that. No, it's okay.
So procedurally, we may have to submit a new application.
I understand, and I promise not to carving trees with Attorney Green's face on it around town in between.
Well, that might be fun. You know, as a cut on the cover page.
And Mr. Fitzpatrick may have a whole different approach, but I'll keep my trees just staying the way they are.
All right. So, you know, that's fine. That's acceptable to us.
Thank you.
So we will, briefly.
I appreciate the chair's comments, and I understand that the matter will be continued, and that, again, I think I heard your comments regarding substantial changes, and that's important to my clients and to me. I wanted to make one more comment. I think, just to clarify my conversation with Attorney Rizzio, what I said to him was that I only represented one of several groups that I was aware had objections, and I didn't think it would be productive to discuss the plan at that time. I think
Appreciate
that a fair characterization?
But it did not require clarification.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So this hearing is continued until our next session, and Attorney Rizzio, you can communicate with staff as to what you'd like to do.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Is everybody? We're going to take a 2-minute recess. Call the meeting back to order. The next item on our agenda is 8990 King Sun Highway Cutoff, special exception and special permit application of Country Realty Company and Anthus Corporation pertaining to the construction of an addition to an existing automobile service facility in a design commercial district.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. My name is Michael Sweeney. I'm a partner with the law firm of Carmody, Torrance, Sandak, and Hennessy. I'm pleased to be here.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. I'll pause for a minute. I'm pleased to be here this evening on behalf of the applicants, actually the co-applicants. I'm sure you're familiar with the property. The applicants are Country Realty Company, the owner of 80 Kings Highway Cutoff, the existing Lexus service facility, and the co-applicant is Anthus Corporation, the owner of 90 Kings Highway Cutoff. That's a property which is the former diner. It's been abandoned and fallow and some distress at this point. The application before you this evening is to consolidate the two parcels. Country Realty is presently leasing the property from Anthus and will acquire the property with the assumption that we're hopeful that you'll approve this application, consolidate the two parcels, eviscerate the lot lines, and then it'll accommodate the application that we have before you this evening. Yes, sir? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you... The application before you is a special permit and a site plan application. We believe it's conforming with the Design Commercial District, the DCD zone, as well as the Commerce Drive Design District overlay. Previously, I've provided copies of our notification letter to abutting property owners as well as to those within 200 feet, and they were presented to staff. If I may, with your permission, I'll give a very brief introduction about the application, and then I'll invite our site planner, Mr. Dan Tompkins, to talk to you a little bit about the site and how we envision to operate after the consolidation. So with me this evening is Dan Tompkins. He's a principal of Environmental Design Partnership. He prepared the site plans that you have as part of your material. Also, Walter Jobs of the Huntington Company. He prepared the engineering plans that have been submitted. Michael Samansko is with us as well. He's our architect with Synthesis Architects, and he prepared the architectural drawings and renderings that you have. And finally, Mike Galante is present as well. He's with Fred Clark Associates. He prepared the traffic study, which we submitted as part of our application. The purpose of this application, along with the consolidation of the properties, is to improve what we believe is a first-class vehicle services facility, to expand and improve what we believe is a high level of customer service, not only that New Country Lexus wants to provide to its customers, but also is mandated and guidance that we receive from the manufacturer. It's done in conjunction with the manufacturer, and it's designed to meet internal image and space requirements that the manufacturer requires. That to the side, we believe will be a much more inviting and functional facility and provide a better experience for Lexus customers. The 80 Kings Highway Cutoff property is 1.6 acres. It has the existing Lexus service facility that you see there now. That will remain essentially unchanged. There are 2 buildings on the property presently. There are 13 service bays, and then there's an administrative and a customer service building. The new addition that will be present on both properties will probably mainly on the 90 Kings Highway cutoff property. It will be 9,130 square feet, contains 16 service bays, a lunchroom, a storage area, and some lockers. Probably the best news about this is that the building, which is in some distress at this point, the old diner, will be demolished. That property is approximately 0.47 acres, and then will be incorporated into the site plan that you have before you. As an aside, a variance was granted in November of 2012 by the ZBA. The old diner, I think, was within 6 or 7 feet, I think, of the property line. A variance had been granted on that property, or it had been in that existence for some time. A variance was granted in November to allow 10.8 feet from the front setback line in lieu of the 25 feet. So the plans have been prepared in accordance with the variance approval that was granted by the ZBA. To sum up, we believe that we comply with all the standards set forth in section 25.7. I won't go through each of them with you, but we believe that the building's in harmony with the district that it's in. It's a modern, sleek building, which will, I think, be an improvement to the property. You've been presented with some site plans and some landscaping plans, and we believe it's in harmony with the district. We believe that it will only enhance property values in the district, and we're looking for no dispensation or variances in connection with signage or any other provision of the application. I see that we received a letter of support, which we appreciate, from the Department of Economic and Community Development in the town of Fairfield. I know that's been part of the record, and I'll ask that you please give that some weight as well. Lastly, I think you've seen the site plan. There's only going to be one curb cut now. That's been referenced in the letter from the Department of Economic and Community Development, and that's been incorporated as well into the comments that were made by Mr. Galante in the traffic report, where he concludes that there will be no impact on congestion in the streets or traffic flow in and about the revised Lexus facility. With that, unless you have any questions, I'll ask Mr. Tompkins to talk about the site plan a little bit.
I'll keep this quick.
Your name and business address?
Certainly. My name is Daniel Tompkins. I'm with Environmental Design Partnership. We're out of Clifton Park, New York. Just as background, I've represented the New Country Motor Car Group for well over 20 years. So I have a good sense of how they function, and, you know, this is an example of, you know, them creating solutions to problematic sites. And by problematic, I mean, in this case, everything in the Fairfield, Westport area, the land is precious, so you're always working with something that from a land area is rather small. The addition, as we know, the primary addition falls here. That's over what we refer to as the diner property. There is a small canopy that's also proposed. Going through with the code compliance meeting and receiving feedback from the town, we've made adjustments to our proposed landscaping program in front of the addition. I spoke with the tree warden about species that he would prefer to see and about the placement of the trees, and this is the result. As mentioned before, there was a curb cut here. That's gone, so now we have the one existing curb cut here and the other existing curb cut, which would be modified to conform to town and state standards with a more elaborate apron. Also, what will happen is that the existing curbing will be replaced with fresh curbing with a 6-inch reveal or a reveal to match existing conditions and new sidewalk.
The layout of the parking is a little unusual, but you have to understand the way the service function is going to work. There's a lot of tandem parking, and I just want to explain that. That's for staging of cars that are awaiting service. What'll happen as what happens now is, you know, customers will come in, they will go inside a two-lane service write-up greeting area. Then the cars are triaged. They may go directly into one of the existing service bays or one of the 16 bays here, or they may await service for, you know, for instance, a couple hours down the line, depending upon whether people are waiting or not.
So the number of bays, I actually read this a little bit differently until for the first time. It's not an increase from 13 to 16, it's an additional.
That's correct. That's correct.
It's going to be a total of 29 bays.
Yes. Now, let me explain something. That doesn't mean that business is going to suddenly double. The way this works is that quite often one technician is working between at least one and a fraction of a service bay. Car may be up on the lift waiting authorization from a client, for example, you know, on a repair or, you know, some other kind of a staging. So I don't want you to think that as much as we would like that, business isn't going to, you know, jump up 100%. The other motivation to the increase in the stalls, and we can't emphasize this enough, is frankly we have to meet manufacturer standards, and this allows us to meet manufacturer standards for a period of time.
Meaning manufacturer standards for a number of bays?
That's right. They periodically roll out standards. They never go down. Bay numbers, showroom numbers, which doesn't apply in this case, size of parts department, the amenities in the waiting room, you know, all that kind of thing is prescribed. So this is a big push, you know, to get the service bay increase, but also if you look at the floor plans, you'll notice that the waiting room gets renovated completely. And then on top of that is the image. Signage, the appearance of the building, everything is a big upgrade.
So, I have another question, but Commissioner Jacobson?
I just have two questions. Where is the nearest 29-bay facility in Connecticut?
Of any kind?
Of any
Just
kind.
for comparison.
Yeah, just for comparison.
I'm going to have to plead ignorance. I don't know.
Where is the nearest one that Lexus owns?
I don't know.
How many towns this is going to serve?
Oh, it's going to. I don't know the radius, the mile radius, but it's going to serve Fairfield. You know, it's. You know, I don't know that that's.
Several other towns.
Well, you know, there will be a limit, obviously, on what people are willing to drive to. The thing that I want to also mention is that this location uses a split shift as it is to meet demand. Because, you know, if you call and you want your car serviced, it doesn't fly well if we can say, well, come in 3 weeks and we'll take care of you.
That was my next question, is what are the operating hours going to be?
Well, the operating hours are going to be the same, about 7:30 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. That's what they have advertised now. They'll keep the two shifts, but this is going to allow them, besides conformance with the manufacturer requirements, it's going to allow to be able to compress some of that delay on appointments and also offer more flexibility in getting people in and out.
Thank you.
So, you know, just looking at the aerials that you provided, parking is clearly an issue for the current facility. Cars stacked on top of each other, parking on the grass, they're just finding every available space.
Well, there shouldn't be too much parking on grass because there isn't any grass. The upper level is a gravel area. It's gravel and it's meant to stay gravel, and that would be up around this area here.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it looks from the aerial.
Yeah.
Like it's, you know, like.
Well, and back to that tandem parking that I referenced, that's something that they do. Once a car comes into the service write-up, an employee drives it, so it's not like, well, okay, you can go park off in the corner there, you know,
that's
so
not
there's an
even-
orderly control to it.
That's not even where I was sort of going with that, but because if you just look at the aerial on the sheet that you
Sure.
provided, it looks like parking is pretty maxed out on the property now. The building that's going to be replaced is the diner with 16 bays, which is more than the number of bays in the existing facility. I don't see the room on the lot for essentially doubling the number of cars that are in this picture on the lot.
Well, they're not going to propose something that's going to backfire on them. The 16 bays, as I said, allows more flexibility in getting cars in and out. In a sense, the turnover of a car can be quicker. So they have that flexibility. In other words, a car won't necessarily come in the morning and stay there till the afternoon. It'll turn over. There's 148 parking spaces available as it's drawn here. That's a lot for, you know, the 29. They will service probably, on average, about 40 cars a day. Some of the cars that you see in that photo are actually new car inventory, because periodically they will put some new car inventory in there before it's brought over to Westport to the new car sales. Now, that's another thing that's highly flexible. If this starts getting crowded and new car inventory is no longer, you know, a thing that they can fit, they'll find another location for that. New Country has leased land in other locations from time to time in order to take care of new car inventory. So there's a lot of flexibility there.
How many spaces are required for the, you know, under the regulations?
10. Your regulations are very open in terms of, you know, it doesn't really, the regulations don't really address the modern service facility. The closest you can find in your ordinance, I believe, is 10. It's just a flat number.
George wants to find record. There's actually two sections that we've dealt with any automotive use. There's a section automotive use in general that requires 10 spaces, and there's also this, the number is escaping right now, but it's the last section in the parking regulations that says other uses. And what you've done in the past, is that we have hearings and letters of intent is not on, that's the minimum requirement for an automotive use, but depending on what the function is, whether it's sales or repair, based on the information that's submitted, you make a decision whether or not there was enough parking so that it doesn't create any offset.
Fair enough. In terms of the definitive number, that was the only one I had.
Commissioner List.
There's a second section.
Oh, fine, thanks.
As it is right now, do we have a certain number of allotted spots for parking on a property that you have now?
The 148 striped spots, either tandem or conventional.
Okay, because counting them from your overhead, I count 188 from this plan.
188?
Cars parked on the lot now, in this picture.
Well, the only explanation I can have is that, and it wouldn't bring it up 40 spaces, is that this area here would lend it, that, you know, we earmarked that, just, it doesn't have a horizontal line across there. That would have increased things by maybe 8 or 10, but I don't have an explanation for the 188.
So, I mean, we're going to be using this basically to service cars and park cars for the dealership, correct? We're going to use this property to store cars for the dealership in Westport.
That's right.
And to service cars.
That's right. Now, as an underline, though, the inventory storage, as I said, if there's any pressure on the site at all that we need more parking for service, then the inventory storage disappears.
Well, from what you submitted to us, it looks like there's pressure already on the site.
Well, maybe the other explanation for the additional cars is that with the diner parcel, there was
No,
more parking.
No, I'm looking at your lot that you have without the diner. I mean, the cars basically are parked all over the place. They're not even in the marked spots, especially along the back and along the side and coming in 95. So,
Well,
you know, what I'm trying to get at is we have I'm looking at a
Right.
picture with 180 cars.
Yeah,
And we want to add another 16 bays
that's right.
and bring more service to it. And we're storing cars on the lot already. So,
The additional bays, as I said before, is going to allow a quicker turnover.
no, I understand that,
Yeah.
but I mean, we're not using it just for repair, we're using it for storage as well. Which is really what we're not getting at here, that we're gonna store new cars, park new cars on this lot.
If there's any room available for new cars, that's why we didn't want to gloss over that on the plans, and that's why the word inventory storage was on the site plans. I'm just trying to be perfectly honest with you on that. But
No,
the first thing to go, if there's any pressure that we need more spaces for our service function, that's exactly what'll happen.
How are you getting the cars into, it looks like they have a fence here. Do they go around and come through the hotel when the cars, right now? the way-
This is the dead end of Meadow Street, right here. So this area here,
Yeah, how do you access that now?
through Meadow Street, if you, on Meadow Street, you can go right into that area.
No, access, okay.
Yeah. Now, there's no vehicular connection, if you will, from this area to this area. It drops down, there's a stone wall.
There are residents in this area, not that far. Have they been notified and consulted about this plan? And what is the lighting going to be?
Okay, let's take care of the easy one first. And as far as notifications, I believe notifications went out to a certain, is it a radius or distance?
I can speak to that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the question was on notification to neighbors?
There's all kinds of residential streets near this property.
The notifications that went out, and there's a list that's been provided to staff, not only included the abutting property owners and those within 200 feet, but we went beyond that as well. You'll notice that from the list, we went way beyond that. We also included the condominium that was next door as well and provided notice to them as well. We want to be consistent. When we filed the ZBA application, there wasn't as much guidance on the radius to use, so with advice of staff and consultation with them, we had a very, very broad radius that we used. And rather than just strictly comply with the regulation here, which is the 200 feet and abutters, we went beyond that.
Have you actually gone to streets to talk to people? Have you talked to anybody at all in the neighborhood?
We didn't call a neighborhood meeting or anything like that. If that's where you were getting it.
Change for these people.
Well, there's already, let's be mindful of the fact, there's already an existing Lexus service facility there. And we already include the whole outer part and perimeter of the property.
But you're doubling it.
This is I'm sorry?
You're doubling it.
This is incorporating another half acre, the donut hole, so to speak, within the interior of the property. This property is way overparked for the use that we're suggesting. It is true, and your reading, Mr. Wagner, is correct. There's 13 bays plus 16 bays. And Mr. Tompkins has spoken to the day-in-the-life operation of the site, which hopefully gives you a little bit more sense of the way it works. But we're restricted to the 148 parking spaces. We can't go beyond that. If we use them, that's great. If the parking spaces run out, then we won't be able to use them. But for the functions of the parking bays and the services that we're providing as a service facility, we are way overparked.
Okay, what about lighting and what about noise?
Well, let's talk about lighting. Lighting, the proposed lighting and the existing lighting, there's no pole lights, with the exception of one little light that's on a very short pole that's actually mounted to the building here. All of the other lights are wall-mounted lights, and we're going to propose the same thing with our lighting.
Are they dark sky lighting?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
So you're taking my thunder a little bit. When you look at the, and there was a product submittal too, it's a downcasting light. Now, with the dark sky business is that if this is a wall, for example, it's going to have a very defined, and this is the ground, the light is going to have a very defined cone or limit to it. It's not going to go out in infinity like an old-fashioned wall-mounted light that hits you in the face, you know, the glare, that type of thing, and just seems to go off. It's downcasting. It's sort of like that sconce, if you flipped it upside down, it's downcasting. What you would see if you're looking at it, you know, if you're standing, you're looking at the wall, you're going to see a shield across it, and it's downward directing. It's a little problematic in that it doesn't throw the light out as much, but it does a very effective job of not creating glare. Now, I want to just point out something to you on the foot candle analysis. The foot candle analysis is created by the vendor, and their program can't take into account things like retaining walls and fences. But this part of the parking actually sits lower than the adjacent hotel parking and pavement, and there's a solid wall across here. My guess is the hotel probably put it up to shield the view of the diner. But it's a solid fence, and therefore the light is just going to come to there, and any of the very, very minor foot candle notations on this side just are in error. It's going to be zero. So this isn't going to be any kind of a nuisance to anybody, and it's certainly not going to throw light like a large shopping mall area or anything like that, or even a car dealership that's geared for sales. It's going to be really for security more than anything. And it's going to be 5 units, LED units for efficiency, and that's all we're proposing to do.
What about noise?
Well, once again, their operations shut down around 8 o'clock at night, so that shouldn't be a factor beyond that. They're vehicles. It's not like a lot of heavy trucks coming in and out or anything like that. They're Lexus. You know, we're not even talking about, you know, early model used cars or anything like that. It's like just a lot of cars, but not noisy.
Commissioner Canale.
It was dark sky.
Very good. Anybody else have a question at the moment? Yes, Mr. Francis?
How do you secure your inventory?
Well, they take the keys out of the car, and I'm not being funny about that, is they don't lock up this area, you know, with fencing across here, and there is a sliding gate over here, but I'm not even sure if it functions. So, you know, enough light so that someone is conspicuous if they're out there with a car jack or something, trying to steal wheels or tires. You know, they have employed video cameras in a lot of their sites. I honestly don't know if they employ that here, but that tends to be the trend that they've been using.
I noticed on your plan that you had a car washing area. Did I misread that, or?
Well, one of the bays might be used for what they call detailing and washing.
Okay, you're not going to have any vacuums.
Well, it would be inside the building.
Inside the building, okay.
Yeah, yeah. One other thing I just want to point out before I step down here is that part of our improvements in our stormwater management improvements, and Mr. Jobs will speak to that more, is that they did have a feature here on the previous owner had like a little putting green feature, and since it's been kind of ignored and overgrown. We're actually going to convert that into what they call a rain garden. And, you know, most of you, I'm sure, know, but just in case one of you don't, a rain garden is just one of the green trends towards stormwater management in an attempt to get the water recharged into the ground rather than conveyed into catch basins and off-site. So, excuse me?
No putting green?
No putting green. Sorry.
The only thing I liked about this applicant, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
You know, then you need to get your car serviced there because it was being ignored. It just was never utilized. So anyway, those are the high points. The lighting is limited. There's a lot of planting along the front, new sidewalk, new curbing, you know, the rain garden, and there we are.
You're going to submit a sign plan, right?
Excuse me?
A sign?
Oh, yeah, and that's part of the package. You should have seen where there's signage on the front and, you know, maybe one of the sides of the building and a reutilization of an existing pylon
And it
sign.
conforms to our rules?
It does.
Okay.
No, we're not asking for any variance on any of the signage.
Yes, Mr. Thompson, I just wondered if you could, you know, one of the questions before about the parking usage, you could state a little more clearly about how you anticipate that parking usage being. With 140 spaces, there must be some pattern, just a service facility, meaning, you know, how many cars you get a day, how many appointments, concurrence, what time they're picked up. I'm just getting a sense that the part that people are having a tough time understanding is the new car storage. So how much would be for service? And new car storage is different. I mean, you don't have customers parking. You don't need striped spaces. We have that at dealers. They just park out. Sometimes they park in a cage. So that's what might be filling up the lot, maybe filling in some of the 180 cars. But I'm more concerned about this use and the expansion of this use and how many of these spaces will truly be required in your experience working with dealerships for a 29-bay facility.
You got a good point.
Understanding that you're going to fill it in with, you know, not so much worried about the new cars because they're, you know.
Okay, well, they tell me that they, on average, and it jumps up and down, but they might see 40, 45 cars come in during the course of a day.
Okay.
So there's a number there. Let's say that's a static number. We have, you know, employees on maximum shift in the high 20s, so that's why there was employee parking that was designated on the site plan that Mr. Jones created. Then, you know, you always...
40, 45 based on how many bays? Based on what you're proposing or based on what you have now? I'm sorry.
The 45 would be, let's be conservative. Let's say 45 to 50 based on the new number, because we're not going to double business. It's not going to happen. So if they're doing an average of 40 now, what we're going to get is we're going to not get 80 people coming in the course of a day. It's just not going to happen. Those service bays, a lot of them are going to be underutilized because, quite frankly, it's just to meet the manufacturer's standards. And I know it doesn't, I'm not being glib about that. You know, there's certain penalties if you don't meet the manufacturer's standards. So you bend over backwards. If you're a good dealer in good standing with a manufacturer, you want to meet their requirements as much as you can. So it's not going to go from 40 to 80. There had better be an increase, but, you know, it's going to be an incremental increase.
How many spaces are allotted for employees?
28 spaces. If they need a few...
48 plus 28. Like 48 for the service and 28 more for the employees?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So now we're up around 70, let's say, 70 or 80. Then you have people that are going to come in. There's always a do-it-yourselfer type guy that's going to come in and he wants a part. That's why we got customer visiting parking designated along the front here. So some of those spaces on the course of a day are going to be empty and available for people coming in. Maybe they're leaving in 15 minutes after they pick up, I don't know what, you know, but they pick up a part. And then the rest of the spaces would be for inventory, and like I said, that's a flexible number. If it turns out the business increases more substantially than, thought, then that inventory storage can be reduced. Here's another thing, though, is that not everybody that gets serviced comes into the dealership. They pick up a lot of cars from customers. So if you got a Lexus, keep that in mind, all kidding aside. They probably pick up 40 or 50% of their customers at times. They will go get the vehicle, bring it back to the shop, and then bring it back to the owner. So there's going to be a few demo cars, if you will, that are used to bring people over to grab a car and bring it back. But that also helps reduce the number on site overall.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get rough numbers.
I know.
Let's go roughly with what you just said.
Yeah.
About 45, 50, let's say 50 cars
Sure.
a day, 20 to 30 employee spots, including the few people for parts, that's like 80. So maybe 60 would be new car storage or something like that. I guess my concern would be, that's kind of predicated, if you get a new car, it's got to go someplace. So if there's some big new car shipments, and all of a sudden you've got 100 spaces taken up by new cars, what happens to the service?
Well, that's not going to happen. They're never going to try to put 100 there because that's just going to work against them. They would have to use another site. Like I said, they do lease sites periodically. I can't tell you where they are, but I know that they do that. So that's an availability that they, practice that they do.
I'm sorry, I just have one more question. Where's the nearest Lexus facilities to here? I don't have a Lexus, so I don't know.
Well,
This is service.
there's a service,
Yeah,
the
service.
sales.
No, not sales, service. Like I'm saying, like when you say your business won't double, nothing by this is going to put a new Lexus on the road. So you're still populated. So I'm just wondering about, are there other facilities around where you may draw from?
To be honest with you, I'm not that familiar with Fairfield. I'm from upstate New York. I don't know where the next or nearest Lexus facility is. I honestly don't.
Greenwich. Okay.
Oh, okay.
That's what I need.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, I don't know if this is possible. You've got,
Excuse me.
looks like 3 more witnesses. We have a curfew at 11. There does not appear to be any member of the public here to comment on this. Of course, I'll go through that if we get there. I think it would be great if we could get it done by 11. I don't know if that's possible.
That was my hope. I wasn't aware of the 11 o'clock curfew, but let me make a few comments. Maybe we can run through our consultant comments really quick.
Okay.
And
I wanted to just put that out there for you so you can try to manage your time.
if we can close tonight, that'd be super. I can represent to the commission that, again, to Ms. Jacobson's query earlier, we over-noticed this application. And I have not received one phone call or query from anyone in the public, nor I think anyone on our team. And I can also represent to you that when we did the ZBA application, it was the exact same application. We walked through exactly what was planned there, so the ZBA would understand, and those who were interested at that hearing would understand what was planned for the site. There were no comments at the ZBA either, for whatever that's worth.
How big is the service bay in Greenwich?
I can't comment on that, but one thing I can tell you, because I do some work with automobile manufacturers and the franchising work that's done with the manufacturer and the local dealer. And if I don't use the word draconian very often, but draconian is the word to use with the way that dealers need to manage the relationship with manufacturers. There are very stringent requirements where your franchise is predicated upon maintaining that franchise if you do not maintain these standards. The contracts are extremely complicated. There's constant review. A dealership like Lexus goes under review constantly. Quality and standard of operations, customer satisfaction is prime. So all that was said by Mr. Tompkins is absolutely true. I'm familiar with the Greenwich site a little bit. I can also tell you as a real estate attorney that car dealers, what they do is they beg, borrow, and steal for every piece of property they can find in order to find a location in order to meet the manufacturer requirements and to store their cars and also have their service facility. It's a real problem in Fairfield County. Lexus is fortunate that we have a very good site here, and the site works. I took a quick look at the aerial photograph that Mr. Alessi referred to, and my counting may be off, but I came up with 135 cars, and I also, not 180, I also counted the empty spaces with the help of Mr. Samansko. And I could be off, we were looking at it pretty quick, but I just wanted to make that comment as well. But we are physically limited to 148 parking spaces. We can't have more than that there. It will be filled with cars for the purposes that Mr. Tompkins has spoken to. The fact that we're going from 13 to 29 is not going to double the work that's expected there has been represented to you. But we're only going to be able to use 148 spaces. We can't go beyond that. The spaces that you see there now being used that I counted on the existing property look pretty close to 148, came up with about 135, and that was sans counting the cars that were parked on the diner parking lot, which I think was the same standard that Mr. Alessi used. Security. The dealers are always mindful of not making their property look like Fort Knox. I think you'd be concerned if we're proposing tall fences and all types of security measures that would make it look like it was that it was Fort Knox. We try to make it blend in and look at as an upscale property with I think is a nice, sleek, modern building. With that, maybe I'll have Mr. Samansko speak next. He's our architect. He prepared the architectural plans that you have.
Good evening. Michael Samansko from Synthesis Architects, Schenectady, New York. Like Mr. Tompkins, we've been representing New Country Motor Car Group for about 25 years. Our firm's specialty is in automotive dealership design. So a couple of points. I think you folks have seen the floor plans. Essentially, we have the service addition and we have the interior space. A couple comments I'd like to add to what Dan Tompkins had said. The 16 spaces also meet more modern standards for dealership service. So the height's a little bit higher. We generally like to get about 15 to 15 and a half feet below the bar joist structure. The width of the building is a appropriate modern width for safe maneuvering of vehicles. It allows for servicing of taller vehicles such as SUVs, things like that. So that is also part of the driving force of adding these bays. The customer satisfaction, again, talking to the site, the dealers are rated on customer satisfaction. So part of what we're doing is improving the customer experience for service, and that would also translate into site. A neat, orderly site is going to translate into a better customer satisfaction. That customer satisfaction is how the dealers rate it, and it's very important to them. So that is also part of what is driving this project. A better customer experience, better flow for customers, better write-up facilities, and better waiting facilities. We're making significant changes to the exterior of the building. I would say it's a much softer appearance from the current, white stucco buildings. We have a cultured stone finish that will be on what we'll call the customer contact spaces, wherever the customers approach and drive from. We have a matching split-face architectural block for the balance of the service building that complements the cultured stone that'll be on the service administration portion of the building. And the signage bands and metal bands here will be in a Luca Bond finish, which is a aluminum metal finish that would be as an accent around the building as well. All very durable, maintenance-free finishes. Building's not going to require hardly any maintenance at all to the exterior of the building. The balance of the site, the existing service building and the retaining wall will be also painted to match the color of the cultured stone in the block.
Yes, Commissioner Francis?
Why did you use two different stones for the buildings? I noticed that.
The customer contact space will be culture stone finish, so it looks like a natural stone. We wanted to contrast that for the service area with an architectural split face block. So the colors will be similar and complementary, but we didn't feel it was appropriate to add the culture stone around the entire body of the building. It would almost feel like it's too much to be able to do that.
Any other questions? Thank you.
I'll invite Mr. Jobst to the podium. He prepared our engineering plans, and he can briefly speak to his conclusions in his plans.
For the record, Walter Jobst, professional engineer and land surveyor. Will be extremely brief. There is some existing drainage on site. DEP considers this what they call a retrofit site, an older commercial or industrial site that doesn't comply with the current standards. Now, what we've tried to do is add additional drainage and detention and water quality management systems to upgrade the site to better comply with today's standards. We've done that. We've added additional detention beneath the parking lot in this area. That will reduce flows off-site to a rate below what they are now for all of the storms that we analyzed. We've also going to retrofit the existing drainage system with a hydrodynamic separator, which will place over the existing pipe that leaves the site. That will give us a cleansing and upgrade our stormwater quality as it discharges from the site to better comply with today's standards. Any questions?
Are you going to be involved with this removal of the existing grease trap and disconnection of the existing sanitary line, laterals, and stuff like that? I mean, you mentioned that,
Well, that'll be the contractor. We'll do that and coordinate that with the health and sewer department in the town. Thank you.
As part of the building process going through the town hall and pulling building permits, all those details will be overlooked. And when we pull our building permit, not only will zoning, but all the other town departments will be scrutinizing that. Mr. Galante, our traffic engineer.
Good evening, Mike Galante, and I'll do this without boards. We prepared a traffic study, and in our analysis, I assumed a doubling of the business. It's actually more than doubling of the business, to be conservative. So we put more traffic on the road system. But I keep in mind, the driver that's there today, there's a new traffic signal there that the town put in as part of the train station. So access has been improved. So you will see accident numbers go down as you go forward with the traffic signal at that driveway. With the expansion of the building itself, you now have circulation for emergency vehicles that you don't have today. Now you go in the driveway, it's somewhat of a dead-end parking lot. If you go there, you know, the old days of making an appointment and going there at 7 o'clock to wait for the doors to open up are long gone. You go to this dealership or any other dealership, make an appointment, they tell you to come at 8:15. So you go in, there isn't a line. Being open to 8 o'clock at night is great for service because you spread out the activities and spread out the use. In the statement, the comment about a technician using more than one bay is correct because you may be waiting for parts on a particular car and you could be working on a second car. There is a car wash bay there now, so it's there in the future. So the car's all washed when you come in for service. I believe it's done indoors. So generally speaking, you know, we've done the traffic study. It's an improved plan as far as I'm concerned because there's better circulation now with 2 driveways. The traffic signal that the town put in as part of the train station project has improved access in and out of the site as it is today. It used to be a stop sign at a 4-way intersection, so that's an improvement by itself. Our traffic study assumes a full build-out of the train station, which as time goes on, it's not going to happen in the next couple of years. So I'll just keep it at that, but we've analyzed it, we've done the analysis, we showed that there's no real change in as far as delays, and I think the traffic signal at the driveway that's there today is key to this plan. It's much more improved access and circulation from a safety point of view and from traffic congestion. And I'll leave the boards back there.
Commissioner Canale?
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Galante, just wanted to check with you. Is it correct that the existing volumes were measured in August of 2012 on Wednesday the 8th and Wednesday the 29th?
Yes, and I knew you would ask that question, but we used the data.
I'm just saying that it would seem that that's sort of a
Well, we would
time of
normally-
year where not as many folks would be around, especially that, I mean, there's no school or anything like that.
Correct, but what we did in this case was we used the volumes from the train station study that we worked on with the town, and we used the adjusted full build traffic volumes for the road system around the train station, which includes the intersections in front of the site itself. So in this case, I did do some counts at the driveways in August.
Just one quick thing about the Metro Center assumptions. Is that with the, is it currently is planned, that is with commercial development
Yes.
at the site as opposed to some discussion of residential?
Well, we did do it
development,
with-
which, as you know, there has been public lobbying by the developer, the private developer, to perhaps move to a residential.
Put some residential in.
Right.
We actually included the
This is based on
residential.
commercial, though, right?
We included, well, there's almost 1 million square feet of commercial
Right.
in this analysis. There's, I think, a 200-room hotel. Then we have the 1,500 parking spaces at the train station. That's all included in the analysis.
But it doesn't include a potential shift to residential on the mill.
We did include that as part of the analysis to include it.
Included, in other words, a scenario in which instead of it being commercial, it would be viewed as residential.
It doesn't make much of a difference as you get farther and farther away from the metro station, just to keep that in mind. But we also included all of the parking spaces, which is 1,500 spaces,
Are those,
used, occupied. Not all 1,500
is this
show
referenced
up.
in the report? I should have read it more closely.
That's okay.
Is it table 4? Okay, I'll take a look. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And just to go back to our August traffic counts, we have done traffic counts at this location multiple times over more than a few years. So we have a track record as far as the activities at the driveway. So that's why I was comfortable using the August counts for the driveways.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Any further?
No, thank you. I think just in sum, I believe the application speaks for itself. I see no nature of the application that is not in compliance with the regulations, but for the front yard setback, which has been satisfied by virtue of the variance that was granted by the ZBA. You've looked at the lot fully parked without the additional building being added to it. The site will look like that afterwards. To the extent that there's any encroachment or trespassing off-site or parking in the street, we'll be called on it, and we're not going to do that. But we'll hear from Mr. Wendt and Mr. Devanchuk if that were to happen. But the lot will be fully utilized. The lot will be fully utilized as it is now, and as you've seen from the photos.
Very good, very good. Is there any member of the public who wishes to be heard on this application? All right, hearing none, there's no rebuttal, and I'll close the hearing on the application.